What is it?
It's time to go back.
Welcome.
Hey guys, welcome to the Generation S YouTube channel. This is the first of hopefully many officially exclusive Generation S episodes for the YouTube channel. Now, we've posted our normal show episodes on here, some of them at least, but we're actually going to start doing some other cool stuff just for the YouTube channel, mainly because I don't have the bandwidth to host them on the regular website, and quite frankly, some of this stuff is going to be a bit more in detail on some specific topics, and so, rather than doing a deep dive on a main episode, that's what this channel is kind of for. So, once again, I want to welcome back my absolute top 10 favorite co-host, Luke
Have
Carnevale.
you had 10?
No, I haven't. But
Oh,
you would
okay,
be in the
good.
top 10 if I had
Woo,
10.
that's good. That's a relief.
No, but seriously, obviously one of my favorite co-hosts. And Lou, this was your idea. We've talked about doing spin-off stuff, but like, where would we put it? Where would we host it? And so we figured YouTube's a really great spot because, I didn't realize this. Maybe you did. A lot of people actually do listen to podcasts right here on YouTube.
I do. That's how I first got into podcasts, was just listening on YouTube, because I would have it in the headphones when I was working out, have it in the car driving to and from work. It kind of is the same thing, but it's a little different. I feel like we have a little bit more freedom here, like you said, with the bandwidth and, being open and honest to our listeners. So I think this would be a good location to do a deeper dive, and that has been one of the feedbacks that we've gotten from our listeners, is they want some more details about certain topics, and this is one of the topics that has been requested, has been the video games.
Yep. So, we didn't even intro that yet, Lou. We just said deeper dive. You just gave it away.
Oh, well.
Oh my God. So anyway, you'll see in the title, obviously, this is a video game review, and a bit of a plot twist here. Going forward, I may not be on these episodes all the time. In fact, Lou, including this episode, you're going to kind of take over and you're going to drive, right? You're going to be the main host driving these game reviews and deep dives.
Oh, how the tide have turned. Tide has turned. You might be the top 10 co-host with me now.
I'll take it, man. All right, man. So listen, I'm going to step back and go ahead and take it from here, man. What are we talking about today?
We are talking about WCW NWO Revenge on Nintendo 64. That is today's topic.
Great game.
Great game.
I know we talked about it on the previous pro wrestling episode, but I just once again want to say, love this game.
Yes, I think we touched on it in both the pro wrestling episode and the video game episode separately, but it needs a deeper dive because of our connection as friends just in general, but in the history of video games and professional wrestling, this maybe it stands head and shoulders above the rest. In general, at the time, it was way above and beyond anything else that came out before it.
I think, legitimately, probably the best wrestling game of the 90s. Because you had, in the late 90s, you had like the SmackDown game. Well, the first SmackDown game came out in 99, and I think it was near the end of 99, if I'm not mistaken.
It was probably around the late fall.
Yeah,
just
so
in time for the holidays.
And it was okay. This was more fun to me. Again, the only one that is just as good as this one, it's got to be No Mercy, and I'm sure we'll, either we will or you definitely will do a future deep dive on WWF No Mercy. But this was the first one that I played of this game engine, this style of wrestling game.
And we're going to get into that because this was a sequel to another WCW game. Doesn't get as much love. It's not as good, but we'll get into that. So we're going to go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so do you, just so we can kind of let the listeners know what's the plan here? How are you going to be doing these? Are we going to review it? Are we going to talk about the behind the scenes? What's your plan?
Oh, sure. So we're going to go over the history of the game. We're going to go over, when it was created, the changes that came into this new game from the previous WCW games, some awards that it won, just to give you an overall view of it. And it's not just me and Dan thinking, oh, this is a great game. There are some accolades that go along with us saying it is. We have data that proves so. Data and numbers.
We have data and numbers, and like no one can see this obviously, but I'm looking at our notes for this, and I already told you this off air, but very, very thorough notes, and again, a lot of stuff here that you found through your research that I had no idea about.
Either did I. I found out
Yeah.
stuff today as I was doing some last minute research that I still did not know about, and I had just played the game about 2 weeks ago. So we're gonna go over, a little bit of the development, a little bit of the road to creating Revenge, some new features that were coming into this game from previous games. The previous game was called WCW NWO World Tour. So what was new to this game? And there's a lot. There is a lot of new features, some things you may not know about even after playing the game, some things that were changed or removed when the game was in development, and then we're going to finish it up with our memories about it, some discussion, memories, what we liked about the game, what we disliked about the game, and maybe some friendly arguments as we go along.
So before we talk about Revenge, then you mentioned this was a sequel to World Tour. Did you ever play World Tour?
I did. World Tour came out in 97, so it came out about a year before this. And I do remember playing it, and it was, man, the potential was there. It was a good game. But
Had you played it before you played Revenge, though?
Yes, I did.
Okay, see, I played it afterwards, and so I played it, and I'm like, this is awful.
Yeah.
Because I had played Revenge at that point, which, again, was to me the pinnacle of wrestling games. And so when I went back and played this other game that I, quite frankly, never heard of, I just felt that, like, wow, this was like a step backwards. And then I realized that it came out first, so I was like, okay, it gets a pass.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have not played these games and you're a newer wrestling fan, it's worth picking up, but do yourself a favor. If you're able to get both copies or both on emulation, because let's be honest, that's how a lot of people play these games now. Go with World Tour first. Try it out. It's going to be a little rough, but there's pieces of it that are good. It certainly lays the foundation, and then play Revenge, and you go, okay. And if you really can go in order, World Tour, Revenge, then go to the WWF games, WrestleMania, and No Mercy. If you go the wrong way, it's not going to be as enjoyable. Kind of like the Star Wars movies.
See, I would agree to a point, but the only one I feel like you could go backwards and play after playing maybe No Mercy would be Revenge. I think it's more than World Tour. I'd say more than WrestleMania. Like it holds up. It's still incredibly fun to play. Whereas, like, honestly, like after playing Revenge and you've played World Tour, there's really nothing to bring you back to World Tour other than maybe some of the cool like Japanese wrestlers. But honestly, like I didn't need to go back to World Tour. You know what I mean? Whereas I've played No Mercy, but I can go back and enjoy Revenge. Does that make sense?
It does, but it's also different rosters.
And that's true too.
Yes, yeah. I think that has an effect on it too, because I think a lot of people, I'm not one of them. I'm the whack job that still likes WrestleMania over No Mercy. I believe a lot of people, once they play No Mercy, they're like, I don't need WrestleMania. And then there's a lot of people that play Revenge, like, I don't need World Tour.
Well, see, what I liked about No Mercy, and I know this is a Revenge episode, but I know with No Mercy what I liked was the fact that it had like those branching storylines, which you did not really have with any of the previous games in this series. So I think that's really what it added, plus the new match types and stuff like that. But
oh yeah, there's tons of match types, and that's actually one of the downfalls. Not downfalls, weak points of Revenge is the match types.
Yeah, because they're pretty limited, and we'll talk about that, obviously. But they're definitely limited. I mean, still great, and still, there's plenty of options, but compared to some games, especially games that have come out, in the last 10, 15 years, I mean, pales in comparison in terms of, match variety. But
absolutely.
It's all about the gameplay, and that, to me, is where this is the pinnacle or the shining star, at least of the 90s when it comes to wrestling.
You missed a perfect opportunity. It's all about the game and how you play it.
Well, this is WCW. Triple H is WWF.
I thought for certain you were going to say that. He's going to say it. Nope, he didn't.
I didn't say it. Oh my gosh.
That was very
That's
disappointing.
how you know that's this. Well, that we didn't write that down. This is not scripted. We're just talking, man.
I know, but I'm disappointed. Almost as disappointed as the year this came out. The Jets almost got to the Super Bowl. Did you know that?
Oh my God, there it is. The New York Jets reference.
Did you know the Jets almost went to the Super Bowl in 1998?
I did not. I was not following any kind of football at that point,
they almost did, but they ended up on they were 2 yards short. No joke. Go watch it up.
2 yards short?
2 yards short, and they lost, and they were not able to go to the Super Bowl. But I digress. Should we get into Revenge?
Let's do it.
All right. So like I previously mentioned, this is the sequel to World Tour. World Tour came out on November 30th, 1997, just in time for the holidays. Look at that.
Yeah. It's crazy how that works.
It's amazing. So this game came out, Revenge, came out on October 26th, 1998. Both games were exclusive for the Nintendo 64. Interesting note is that the game came out one day after Halloween Havoc 1998, which I was watching literally about 30 minutes before we did the show because I wanted to get more of a feel for what was going on in WCW. Dan, do you have any memories of Halloween Havoc 98?
So I think I mentioned this previously. I didn't really get into wrestling heavy until honestly 2000, and it was WCW. So people have criticized why would you get into it during the worst time period of the second place company? I said, I don't know, man. It had Sting and he was awesome. So I honestly wasn't watching at the time. Going back now, of course, I've watched matches and whatnot from this era. I actually there's a YouTuber on here. His name is he's called Wrestling Bios, and
He's
I think you've watched him as well. He's amazing. So, but he's doing a series called Reliving the War, where every week he puts out an episode that compares head to head Raw versus Nitro. And right now he just started 1998, so he hasn't gotten to the late 98, when this game came out and when everything was going on with the Wolfpack and everything. But that's coming soon. I think he's up to I want to say February at this point in 1998, as far as, because he does every week is one episode, for each show. So I don't have a lot of memories. Really, what I remember is around that time, again, you had the NWO Wolfpack, and so there were kids in my school that, I think I mentioned this on the pro wrestling episode way back when, of everyone was in the Wolfpack, and I wanted to be in the Wolfpack, and they wouldn't let me, and they said, fine, you could join the Wolfpack, you have to be Disco Inferno. And I was like, that's cool, man. So for a while, Disco Inferno, when I saw him wrestle on TV, I'm like, this guy's got to be great. He was in the Wolfpack. And then I watched him wrestle, and I'm like, this guy's not great. It's pretty terrible.
I actually just watched him fight Juventud Guerrera, at Halloween Havoc, and damn, Disco's bland. He's super bland.
Is he in the Wolfpack during this time period?
I think the Wolfpack had just started. I did get up to full disclosure. I actually had to stop it to record this right when they were doing the Kevin Nash versus Scott Hall match. And I was not watching WCW very much at this point on a weekly basis. I was all in on WWF, and I was starting to get more and more into ECW. And I had read that they were taking Scott Hall's real life alcoholism onto a storyline. And in the video package, they showed it. He was stumbling around. They pretended he got sick. Nash said, this is your last call, and he kind of made fun of him. So, yeah, this was starting to be when WCW was turning the corner in a not such a good way.
Yeah.
But 98's Halloween Havoc was the famous or infamous Goldberg DDP match that, the bell rang and then, boop, we lost the feed because it went over the time limit.
Oh, that's right, because they ended up showing it in its entirety on Nitro the next night, right?
Correct, and it's regarded as one of Goldberg's best matches. Not even just WCW, just of all time.
No, I was going to say, I've always loved Goldberg. Even his bad matches to me are fun to watch just because he's just beating the shit out of guys. It's just great. But watching him have an actual competitive match, you didn't get that often. And when you did, a lot of times it didn't always look the best. And so I feel that I would agree. Goldberg versus DDP, I think DDP brought the best out of Goldberg that you could. I think there are very few wrestlers that are able to do that for Goldberg. No offense. Again, I think he's a terrific talent. That actually, funny enough, so when we're recording this, which is the end of September, I'm assuming this episode's going to be out pretty soon on YouTube, so this won't be too far behind. But if you go to Wrestling Bios, I think the next episode that comes out this week, in fact, talks about the Nitro, the infamous Nitro, where Steven Regal wrestles Goldberg.
Kind of shoots on him a little bit because he was frustrated that Goldberg was doing nothing.
Yep. And so that will be. It still wasn't a great match. I still think that DDP versus Goldberg was leaps and bounds better.
Yes.
I would say it's probably Goldberg's best match in, I guess, ever.
Period.
Really. Yeah.
I can't think of anything that's better. The Hogan match,
as far as most competitive.
Yes.
Even the Hogan match that was full of, which hadn't happened, happens later in the year. Or no, is it
because
1999?
Goldberg's a champ here.
He's the WCW champ?
Yeah, he beat Hogan in summer of '98.
Oh, that's right. And he's fighting. I thought he was fighting DDP for the U.S. title.
No, main
that
event.
was a previous.
This is main event.
Okay.
This is for the world title.
Okay. And so, so he already won the title. And again, that match was full of chicanery and cheating.
Shenanigans.
And really, it was just a spear and a jackhammer. This was a back and forth competitive. I can't believe I forgot that it was for the world title. I remember the match, but I couldn't remember which title it was for.
Got the ECW guy telling WCW guy what's going on. This is ridiculous.
I know, man. This is insane.
Me telling you that Goldberg is the champ is like you telling me what Dawn Marie wore at a certain event in 1999 in ECW. I want you to realize the magnitude of this.
Yeah, but again, I wasn't watching WCW at this time, so
Cop out.
I wasn't invested in the story. No, it's not. I guarantee you, if we talked anything from WCW January of 2000 until they closed shop in early 2001, I can probably tell you who had the title win.
Okay, how about this? Every game that WCW released after this Revenge game was terrible. That's my take on WCW.
I would 100% agree.
In 2001.
I would 100% agree.
So, Halloween Havoc 98 happens, and I'm watching it. There is not one mention of this game coming out tomorrow. Not one. Now, granted,
They
I'm
didn't
about
promoted it all on the pay-per-view.
not that I've seen. Now, again, I did not watch the entire thing. I'm up to literally the promo package for Hall and Nash. It's a pretty good card. Sting versus Bret Hart. Warrior versus Hogan. God help us all.
Oh, I remember that match
too. Yeah.
Terrible match.
Terrible match.
That match is the reason that the British Bulldog ended up retiring.
Oh, that's right, because he hurt his back. But he
hurt his back on the trapdoor that the Ultimate Warrior would use to come in and out of the ring.
Oh, that's right. But he did go back to the WWF.
Yeah, but he was injured.
Yeah.
He didn't last long.
He
was done.
a lot of chin
This
locks.
was his career-ending injury. Yeah, there's a lot of Davey Boy Smith chin locks. But no, man, there's like a lot of resentment because of that, because they feel like, well, if this didn't happen, then maybe British Bulldog would have been around longer.
Yep.
Who knows?
Hopefully that was the case. And there wasn't any other issues that we don't know about. But yeah, I did read the reports way back in the day that it was the trapdoor that hurt the Bulldog.
Yep.
Halloween Havoc 98. No promotions about this game, which if you're a fan of WCW in 99, 2000, let's just say towards the end of WCW, I don't think you're surprised that they were not promoting this game. Now, granted, they did have a sponsor for Halloween Havoc 98. It was Snickers.
How many shows did they sponsor, by the way? I feel like I've seen them on most It was like Snickers and Slim Jim would like flip a coin for who got to sponsor that pay-per-view.
I thought it was Slim Jim was usually Halloween Havoc, but maybe they outbid them. Or
well, I'm just saying in general, I feel like Snickers sponsored a lot of WCW pay-per-views.
Yeah, you want to feel old? Go watch some WCW pay-per-views. It's sponsored by 10-10-3-2-1.
I do remember.
Yeah, how about that? That's nostalgia.
Is that with David Arquette did those commercials for a while?
Ooh, yeah. You know what? They probably got to do the commercials. Hey, you want to be champ too, bro? Let's go.
It'd be a total swerve, bro.
Oh, terrible shit. Terrible.
Oh, my God.
Terrible. So, Halloween Havoc, no promotions for this game. But I did learn something today.
What's
the
that?
original game the original name for the game was just WCW NWO Live. Now, I don't know if it was WCW versus NWO, but Revenge was originally just Live. I don't know. It was just Live. There's some promotional art you could see online if you do a quick Goog. It's like Hall and Nash looking down at the camera in a studio, and the top right corner has the black and white WCW/NWO logo, and it's just Live in red, similar font, but I did not know that.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. Honestly, I guess it's not a bad name, WCW NWO Live. I feel like that would have been fine.
No, I think you're right, but then it hit me. I remember, and I had to look online and look at some matches on YouTube of gameplay. So if you're playing the game, and back then you couldn't change the camera angle, and it's different, is different than the way you play WWE games now, where it's the hard camera. It's presented the same way in the WWE games as it is on TV. You don't see the entrance.
Right.
Revenge, you're looking, and the entrance is in the background. You're looking at it that way. So it's a little bit of a different view. So
that's how they did it for most wrestling games until the later SmackDown games. Like, because I remember like WWF Attitude had that camera view.
Yep.
All the ECW games did. The later WCW games did. So that was like a common view for a lot of those games.
I liked it. I thought it was cool.
I did too, because I like seeing the entranceway. It made each kind of venue feel unique.
I agree. It gave you a little bit of an extra feel. But if you're playing Revenge, there's a couple of signs or posters, but they're not being held by the people in the crowd. They're actually on the guardrail. And one of them says WCW NWO Live.
Interesting.
So
okay.
I thought back in the day it was just like an advertisement for like live, meaning literally live.
Like their live show or whatever.
Tour, like WWE Live, experience it live or something like that. I never put two and two together. I'm like, oh, why does it say live there? Like, no, you want me to go see it live and give you more of my money or my parents' money. So that was interesting. I was able to connect those dots that they left it in the game, which is not terrible, but little Easter egg there.
So I'm wondering why they changed the name to Revenge. Were you able to find out anything about that?
I believe it was going off of the Sting-Hogan rivalry. I didn't see any evidence to prove this, but if you recall...
Was Sting and Hogan still going on at this point?
No, not so much, because Sting was in the Wolfpack, but the development of the game was in 97, when Sting and Hogan were... That's why, if you remember the end of the intro, it's, a picture of Hogan and a picture of Sting, and they lock eyes and it explodes. It's going off of the Sting, Hogan, Sting, NWO storyline, which was everything of 97. I mean, it completely dominated absolutely everything.
Right.
Not even just WCW, it was all of wrestling.
Oh, that was definitely the hot angle of 97.
Yeah.
And of course, we know how that ended.
Oh,
But,
jeez.
I guess that would make sense then to call it Revenge. But here's the thing, like, I mean, they had it called live in development, so I don't know. I mean,
I don't know. It's not a terrible name, but you know what
no,
is
it's
terrible?
not at all.
We know what's terrible is the price they were charging for this game.
Oh,
Not
really?
in retail, but if you were to watch WCW programming or see an ad in WCW magazine, what do you think they were charged for this?
Well, I mean, I got to go off of what games cost back, which honestly, I can't remember. Do you remember what a normal game would cost back in the late 90s?
I don't know, but I know it wasn't this price. I want
Okay.
to say that maybe $40 for an N64 game.
$40? Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So I got to assume that, I mean, you're making it sound like this is maybe a little bit more, so I'm going to say, what, 45, maybe 50?
$69.95.
Holy shit. That's like that's $70.
Plus $8.95 shipping.
Well, everything had shipping and handling back
Plus
then.
your tax. So you're looking at probably $85, give or take.
Well, God, I mean, yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, it was a lot.
I didn't pay that much when I actually got it for free from a friend, so I didn't pay for it at all. But I definitely wouldn't have paid $70 for it plus shipping.
No, that was a lot. But was it worth it? So we're gonna go into a little bit of the features that are new to it, some awards that came from it, just to back up our claim that it's one of the best wrestling games of all time. And then we'll do a deeper dive into the features. So there are some new modes. Obviously, we talked about the roster of WCW. We mentioned Bret Hart. We mentioned Sting. There's 60 plus wrestlers in this game. The ring entrances are there. They were not there in previous games. The arenas are there. Valets, managers. They have a cartoon of the WCW referee Mark Curtis. So they put a lot of effort into this. And again, we'll go into details in a few moments. Reversals are a big thing in this game. Instant replay. Guys stepping over the top rope. It sounds silly, but your big guys were going over the top rope. These are all things that were new to this. But the foundation was laid in the previous game. So Revenge did win Fighting Game of the Year, which was given out by the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences. So it won that award, but the year before, World Tour won it as well. So back-to-back years where THQ and AKI or Aki won awards for these fighting games. But the bad thing is, this was the last AKI-developed WCW game for the N64. The next game that came out was Nitro, and it was not nearly as good. So just giving you the foundation of the game, some of the new features we're going to be talking about, the accolades that the predecessor had, and this was it. It was kind of a downward spiral, and maybe we can go into, the other WCW games.
Oh yeah, I don't think we'll be doing a deep dive in any other WCW games unless it's just to rip them apart.
Yeah, and we could probably do them all in one show and just be like, Nitro sucks, Thunder sucks, Mayhem sucks, Backstage Assault is pretty much an ECW ripoff game, and we're done.
Yeah, basically. And I know they were supposed to come out with one for the PS2, but do you know what that game turned into?
Don't say Legends of Wrestling, because I don't think that's true.
No.
Okay.
No, it's not true.
Oh, is it Def Jam?
It is Def Jam Vendetta. So if you ever played that game, that was essentially a spiritual successor to the WCW, which honestly would have been amazing because that game was fantastic.
It was. That was a great game. And I'm not into hip hop or rap or whatever, and I played it and it was a great game.
That was a hell of a wrestling game, and because it's the same engine, it's where they improved on that Aki engine, right? That's because we didn't talk about this either, but this was all these WCW games were based off of Japanese games, the Virtual Pro Wrestling series that was on the N64 over in Japan, and those were great. I mean, again, I think they followed the same kind of development cycle as the WCW games, where the first couple were a little rough, but Virtual Pro Wrestling 2, have you ever seen gameplay of that, by the way?
I have.
It's basically this game, but just Japanese. The sound effects are all the same. Now the roster is all Japanese wrestlers and whatnot. There's some American wrestlers in there that were popular wrestlers in Japan, like Vader and Andre the Giant, and there's a few others. But it played just like this. So anyway, I just feel like people should know, like many other things that we've consumed in American entertainment, it was based off of something that came out in Japan first.
Go Power Rangers! Oh, sorry, wrong show. So we can agree that this was the peak of WCW video games. I think that's pretty universal. you mentioned, well, I'm sorry, I interrupted with an incorrect assumption. I thought you were going to say Legends of Wrestling. Did you
Nope.
know that Legends of Wrestling was going to be ECW on the next gen?
I did know that, and that's why they included Sabu and RVD in it.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. Van
Yep.
Dam was obviously the face of ECW. Sabu, I don't know why. Maybe because he was not in ECW at the end. The last year he was not there, so maybe they were going to bring him in as a legend, so to speak, because he was in the first game, he wasn't in the second game, and he was developed or in development for the what would end up being Legends of Wrestling. But let's get back to Revenge.
Right.
Let's go over some of the new stuff they brought into this game, and a lot of this stuff, it's going to sound silly saying that, like, oh, they had actual arenas, because now you can make your own arena, you can do anything you want.
Yeah, but back then, this was a big deal.
This
back then.
was a really, really big deal. And I want to get your thoughts on, what arena you liked in the game, and then if you can recall, what the set looked like in real life. Do you have a preference? So I'm going to run down what they had in the game. So they had Monday Nitro,
Yep,
Starcade 97 version of Starcade, which is interesting because the logo, when they come out, where it would say 1997 along the bottom, is just not cut off. It says AKI on it, but then the name holder, the nameplate, says 1997 on it. So there you
well,
go.
it's because Starcade 98 hadn't come out yet when the game came out.
Oh yeah, but it's just weird that one section says AKI and then the other section
right.
says 1997.
Right. Okay. All right, so we got Nitro, Starcade.
Bash at the Beach, Sold Out, Super Brawl, and Halloween Havoc.
Okay.
So a good selection, not all of
Yep.
them, but for the limitations of the N64, that's certainly but it's certainly a significant jump in selection. So did you have a preference in the game? Did you have an arena that you liked, and do you recall any of these arenas in real life as well?
So I'm trying to think. So
I mean,
yes,
Nitro, I know you know in real life, but
I knew Nitro. Honestly, it's funny because I'll go back and watch matches from this time period, and I got to tell you, I mean, I don't know if you'll agree, but I feel like they pretty much nailed the arena entrance ramp, at least for most of these. I think the most accurate maybe was Halloween Havoc. That's the one I probably remember the most from this game. I got to say though, because what I liked about this too is, if you recall, when you selected the arena, that was like the background of like the screen, like the character selection screen and everything like that. So it was kind of the whole vibe. I think Super Brawl was probably my favorite. I don't know why. I think it was just because it was bright and red and it was colorful, and it was either my favorite, probably Super Brawl, or honestly the opposite direction, probably NWO Sold Out.
really, that's weird.
I don't know. It was just a weird yellow with and again, that was when I feel like really was properly represented, because again, I just watched the review of No Way Out, or excuse me, Sold Out 1998 on the Wrestling Bios channel, who, by the way, hopefully listens to this. Ryan, hi. I don't think he's going to listen to this. But anyway, I feel like that was one that they really did a good job of capturing the entranceway that was being used for that pay-per-view.
You know what's funny? I like the complete opposite. I like the Halloween Havoc and Bash at the Beach in the game. I thought they were different. I thought they put a lot of detail into them. Sold Out is probably my least favorite because it's just kind of, Sold Out and Starcade is just one static image. I didn't find them to be too exciting. However, Super Brawl, I want to say it was Super Brawl 8. I
can't remember what number.
The actual set that the wrestlers used was interesting because when they came out, it was like this long, it wasn't LED because obviously LED wasn't out, but it was a long, narrow screen. It was a very unique entrance.
I do, like you're talking about in real life.
In
like
real
the
life,
actual,
yes.
Yes, I remember that too. Like they would walk out from the corners almost, right?
Yeah, it was a very different type of setup. So in real life, Super Brawl wins, Halloween Havoc and Bash at the Beach in the game because they were different. And then Monday Nitro, as silly as it sounds, is a great arena in the game. I say that because it's the most common. It's been in every game, that WCW released. They had a version of Monday Nitro, and then WWE in their games have had versions of Monday Nitro. But man, for 1998, that Nitro arena looked pretty damn sharp as well.
I know. It definitely looked great. And I think for the most part, they did a good job of, again, capturing that feel that the previous games especially didn't do. But I had a question for you. So that Halloween Havoc one, I feel like if you were to picture any WCW pay-per-view logo in your head, I feel like Halloween Havoc's got to be one of the easiest ones to like identify. Like if you were to just look at the image without the font or the text or whatever. So do you know that weird phantom-y looking guy they used on it?
Yes, I do.
Is that based off of anything that you know of?
maybe it was when the Dungeon of Doom was fighting Hogan in like 94, 95-ish.
Okay,
Maybe?
because like
I don't think so, though.
I mean, I'm like maybe it's supposed to be like
The
a
Yeti.
ghost wrestler. Or it could be the Yeti. I just didn't know if you knew. Like I always because they used it a couple of years in a row, that logo, right, with that dude on it.
Yes, they did. And I think it's one of the best names or entrances. Like the whole aura of the Halloween Havoc is very, very good. And I was very disappointed when WWE bought WCW. They brought over the Great American Bash. I mean, that's a great pay-per-view also.
Yep.
It was weird it wasn't in the game, but that was the only name that WWE used for the longest time. And now NXT is starting to use some of these older WCW. I think they used ECW's Heatwave. I believe so, or something like that. But I know they've used Halloween Havoc. It's fantastic. It's very exciting.
Yeah,
it's a small thing
even
in
the
life.
even the name Halloween Havoc, it just sounds like, all right, these guys, we're in for a fight. You know, you watch this show, it's you know what you're gonna get just by the name. Like the name Starcade. I mean, I'm probably sound really ignorant, but like, what does that even mean?
It means
like-
you're a star.
On what?
A
On the
cade.
arcade?
Yeah.
On-
Lancecade. Garrisoncade.
okay,
Arcade.
that's what I thought. So anyway,
And
so
they made that into
I-
a glorified house show. Starcade.
well, I did know that. Yeah, I
Ugh,
know that
that's
WWE kind of butchered it.
terrible.
But I know, so I'm trying. I just looking back at like all the old WCW and the WWF pay-per-view names back in the day. Like some of them were just awesome. Like you had, just again Halloween Havoc. You had the Great American Bash, Bash at the Beach, Super Brawl, and then on the WWF side you had No Mercy and Armageddon and the Royal Rumble, even in WrestleMania. I mean, just great names. And I feel like now, I mean, we're coming back to it a little bit, but for many years, WWE in particular has just very bland and boring branding on their. Are they even pay-per-views anymore? I mean, they're all on the network.
They're called
like,
premium events now.
premium events. So their premium events. Well, I'll say this: the names of their premium events suck, and they need to really improve them. And I think they've started. Like you had that Clash at the Castle recently. That's an awesome concept.
Yeah.
And you still have WrestleMania. You have Survivor Series. You have those, but then you've got like Money in the Bank or Hell in a. Basically,
They're
you turn
naming-
match types into
Elimination
pay-per-views.
Chamber.
So like I don't like that. I like the name of those for match types. I don't think they work for premium event names.
I will agree, but there is one, and it's actually it's the first time I think we're mentioning the podcast. Not podcast, YouTube. Same difference.
It's still a podcast.
It's still the same to me, damn it. TNA Lockdown.
Yeah.
It was an all pay-per-view in the steel cage. Was the first, I believe, I'm pretty confident saying this. It was the first fully gimmicked pay-per-view. But it wasn't just TNA presents Steel Cage. Lockdown.
No, they had a name for it.
Lockdown
Well, that's
and
why.
the 6 Sides of Steel.
Well, do you remember? So, okay, when WWE would be using the Elimination Chamber, they used to hold that. Eventually, it would become a staple of No Way Out.
Yeah.
And that was the whole gimmick of like, you're not getting out. It's the chamber. So like that works for it. Now they had No Way Out before they had the Elimination Chamber. But my point being is that fit perfectly for that pay-per-view name.
Yeah.
And so when they just started calling it Elimination Chamber, it's like, that's lame because A, not every match is going to be in the Elimination Chamber. It's very misleading. And B, it's just boring. So I think TNA Lockdown might have been the only one since that every single match was in that gimmick. Have there been any other since then, WWE or otherwise, that have been every single match utilize the gimmick of whatever the pay-per-view is called?
Yes, actually, it's very ironic. I don't know if you're teeing this up for me on purpose. I just read an article today because, like Dan said, we are recording the end of September 2022. Extreme Rules is going to be, and in Philadelphia, out of all places, God help them, they're having an extreme pay-per-view in Philadelphia. Good for them. But there's been Extreme Rules pay-per-views where not every match is Extreme Rules. That makes no freaking sense.
Yeah.
The first Extreme Rules, every match had some sort of gimmick, whether it be, I can't remember, they just said everything's Extreme Rules, or it's a chairs match, it's a ladder match, it's a kendo stick match, but I do remember seeing that as of right now, the Extreme Rules premium event is all, has something going on in them.
So every single match has some sort of Extreme Rules stipulation.
Or it's just Extreme Rules. I'm not up to the, day-to-day WWE stuff right now. But that is what I read. The first Extreme Rules had everything be extreme. Then, could you imagine? We're going to have a match called pay-per-view called Extreme Rules, and this match is scheduled for one fall. Okay, well, what's extreme about it? Paul Heyman would say extreme was not always blood and guts. Extreme was the type of wrestling you did.
Okay.
So take that for what it's worth. But Paul's word is always not the best to go with.
That's fair.
Yes. But yeah, I agree. I think TNA had some good names. I think Lockdown was certainly one of them. Nothing jumps out to me about ECW's names other than the first, which was Barely Legal, because it kind of was. It got kicked off pay-per-view. So that's another thing, names that are relevant. Like you said, Clash at the Castle, that makes sense. Barely Legal, that made sense. If you are a fan of that genre of wrestling, boy, did that pay-per-view name kind of go with. And there's also some innuendos of Barely Legal and ECW and women and all that stuff. But I agree. For the
it was a different time.
It was. For the most part, I will say that WCW had the best pay-per-view names. AEW's right now, no. They're just, what the hell is a Full Gear? A Full Gear of War? What is that?
Yeah.
All
Well,
in,
they had a
all
couple
out.
good ones.
What? All in, all out. Am I talking about my belly button? What are we talking about here?
I like some of AEW's names. I like Double or Nothing. I like All In. I like some of those. I don't like all of them.
They did Bash at the Beach.
That's right, because I think Dusty Rhodes and Cody own the rights to it, so they were able to do Bash at the Beach. Now that Cody's back in WWE, though, do you think they'll do a Bash at the Beach in WWE?
Jeez, that would be really. I don't think Cody would do that. I don't think he would take that away from Tony Khan. I don't think he's that kind of spiteful guy. I don't think Triple H is either. Vince would.
That's fair, but Vince is gone, as we know.
He is, so we think.
Yeah. All right, so we talked about those arenas. What are some other new things?
Well, speaking about the arenas, one last thing about that. You had mentioned that they were the background of the main menu. Did you know, and I didn't know this, did you know the last arena you picked was always what was in the background? So if you...
That I did not know.
I didn't know that either, but I don't know how long. So when I booted up the game for the first time, and I don't know how many, I would say 10 years, 15 years, maybe. I know I played with you in college because you won one of the titles with one of the random guys in the game, and I know I didn't, so it must have been you.
Yeah.
So figure at least 12 years or so. So when I booted that game up the first time in 12 years, and Arena X, Nitro, or Bash at the Beach, whatever it was that the last arena I used 12 years ago? I like to think so, but...
Probably, yeah.
That'd be crazy. So another good thing about this game was it also didn't need a memory card. Or the little thing.
Yeah, it was all stored in the cartridge.
Yes.
Well, a lot of games on the N64 had the built-in memory, right? There was a few that you needed a memory. In fact, there was another wrestling game. I think I talked about this previously. WWF Attitude. You needed a memory card to save any kind of progress or created wrestlers, anything like that. It did not store in the cartridge, which thankfully in future WWF N64 games they remedied. But I remember that specifically. It was a big pain point for me because I did not have a memory card.
I don't know. Well, I'm sorry, I should rephrase that. I don't recall that because I never played any wrestling games on N64 that were not WCW. So my question to that is, I wonder if, because that was a claim that made the WWF Attitude game.
Yep.
When they released Hardcore Revolution, did they still have the need for the memory card, whatever you want to call it? Or did they figure out, like, oh, crap, everybody else is just saving it to the system, we got to figure it out? But
see, that I don't know because I did play the ECW. Well, I played one of the ECW games, but it was on PlayStation, so I had a memory card anyway. So I don't know. You'll have to do if we're going to do a deep dive on that one. You got to do some research and find out if they use memory cards for it.
I have to go and get ECW for the N64 now. Confirmed. All right. So another big thing that was in Revenge was the championship mode. So this was kind of like an arcade fighting. It wasn't a tournament because you didn't see who you were going to fight. At least not to the end. Like if you knew that Hulk Hogan you made Hogan the champion in the game, you knew you were going to fight Hogan at the end, but along that journey, you didn't know who you were going to get, whereas a tournament, you kind of know. But it was cool because you actually had the titles in there, too, which was something kind of new. I mean, they had titles in other games, but not this many, not this much detail. And again, looking back at it now, it's nothing special, but at the time, it certainly was. And they had them all. They had the Cruiserweight.
And they were all unique looking, yeah.
Yeah, they had the Cruiserweight title, TV title, tag titles, U.S. title, and of course, the World Heavyweight Championship. Had some unlockable characters in the game also. I remember, and I didn't write them down. Piper was the world champion.
Yep.
Canyon was the TV champion.
Mm-hmm. I remember them. I know them, by the way.
The Faces of Fear. And it's a damn tragedy that Ming and Barbarian, Haku, whatever you want to call them, did not get a World Tag Team title run. I don't think they did, because
No.
I don't know who. If it was a legitimate fight, who could have beaten Ming and Barbarian? What were the other
a very
two?
small list, if anybody.
So U.S. and Cruiserweight, I don't recall those two. Was U.S. Raven?
No, U.S. was Kurt Hennig.
Oh, okay. And Cruiserweight, was it Dean Malenko?
That one I don't remember.
Okay.
That's the only one I can't remember. We'll have to look that up, because there was a lot. I will say this: there was a lot of cruiserweights in this game, and there were a lot of. I think cruiserweights are probably my funnest to play with. Is that even a funnest?
Most fun.
Anyway, they were the most fun to. Thank you. They were the most fun to play with. I loved like playing as Rey Mysterio, because he would do like by default like a moonsault off the top rope, which not everyone could do. So I thought I thought they played in there. They did the quick moves and stuff like that. So I thought cruiserweights were a lot of fun to play with, and which kind of mirrors what was going on in WCW at the time. They were always known for their cruiserweight division, which for most of WCW was pretty awesome.
It was. I don't think anybody, even if you were not a WCW fan, if you were one of those, and they still exist, there are people that just like WWE, and there are people that will always hate WWE. But I think the Cruiserweight division was one of those things that even if you didn't like WCW, you'd look over and go, oh, that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool.
Well, and they tried replicating it in WWF back in the day, and they couldn't.
A couple times they tried to, and it just didn't work.
Well, they didn't really have the talent. They would bring in random luchadors, which is fine. I mean, the matches themselves weren't bad, but I don't know. I think two things made WCW a better place to watch we'll call them cruiserweight matches, because that's what we know them as, is the ring size was smaller. So you had guys flying across the ring, and it just looked more exciting.
Yep.
And then the sound of the mat, and just the fact that when the ropes, yes, but I guess the ropes were tighter, so they didn't bend as much.
Yep.
or would give as much. But even the mat itself, the sound had a better snap to it, which is like known. Like if you go on like Reddit and just like on Squared Circle, and people always talk about, oh man, I love the sound of that WCW mat. And it's true, because it sounded amazing. Like if you took a bump on that, it sounded like you broke your back. But not only that, but I feel like the WCW mat didn't give as much. It didn't bounce as much.
I actually was thinking to myself, like I said, about an hour ago, I'm like, I love the WCW mat.
It was my favorite, to this day, my favorite wrestling ring of all time is the WCW wrestling
WCW ring. Is number one, ECW is number two, because that had a lot of impact on it also. That
Okay.
sounded like somebody was going to break their arm or leg or back just from a body slam. It was insane. But I agree, the cruiserweights in the game were very fun to play as, and we'll get into that when we reminisce more details about what we liked and disliked about the game. Another thing, I don't think the cruiserweights were in this category. Do you recall the combo system? That there were a few characters that had a combination of strikes and grapple moves. I recall two of them. One of them,
I can recall two as well.
So you name one. Go ahead.
Goldberg.
Glacier.
Yeah, that was going to be my other one too.
I think Canyon also.
I think he did, because he had that martial, and then I think Eric Bischoff actually had the combo system.
Geez. Well, I'll tell you what.
Honestly,
Eazy-E was. I would be more intimidated by Eazy-E's kickboxing than I would Shane McMahon's punches that we had to watch a couple years ago in WWE. They were bad.
Okay. So let's do a more apropos comparison then. In real life, who would you be more intimidated by in a fight, Eric Bischoff or Vince McMahon?
Oh, Vince McMahon.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I don't know what Vince is going to do.
It is fair, yeah. Well, and especially back maybe now, because he's in his mid-70s, I probably wouldn't be very scared.
Okay,
of him.
so
but back in like
98?
1998,
Vince McMahon, 1998 Eric Bischoff.
See, against each other, I honestly would. There's always talk of like remember when Bischoff at Slamboree called out Vince McMahon and he didn't show up.
That's another good name, by the way.
Slamboree, yes, I agree. Fantastic name. But everyone was like, "Oh, if Vince shows up, Eric, he's gonna kick your ass." And he's like, maybe, probably." But honestly, man, like he was a trained martial artist, and I don't think Vince McMahon had any kind of training. I think he was a big guy, and maybe he knew how to fight. But I don't know, man. I feel like Eric Bischoff might actually hold his own against Vince McMahon.
I think you're right. I think everything you said was 100% right. It kind of goes. This is crazy, but hear me out. Those very, very, very early UFC fights.
Yeah,
like we're talking like the first year that they were around. You had guys that were just street fighters.
Mm-hmm.
Not the street fighters with that throw Hadoukens. That would be awesome. But
wouldn't it? Yeah.
This the guys that were bar fighters, and then you had guys like Severin and Shamrock and oh man, what's his name? He wore the formal fighting whatever it's called.
Like Royce Gracie?
Yes.
Yeah, or Royce Gracie. Yeah.
When those guys came in and you had the guys that looked more intimidating than them but weren't trained trying to go after them, knock them out really quick.
They get their asses kicked
Yeah.
because, I mean, yeah. And that's
CM
where,
Punk.
like,
Excuse me.
and that's where MMA has evolved, right? I mean, that's back in the day. It was just like you basically could have just picked two drunk guys at a bar and threw them in a cage, and that was what you had for the first 5 years of UFC.
Yeah.
And then they realized, oh, shit, the whole idea is that you have these people that are professional fighters in these different disciplines,
Yep.
Who's better. And then eventually they realize, well, you know what, there's something from each one that's really good. Let's go ahead and just kind of combine that into, because now you have, essentially it's MMA. So every single fighter specializes in at least one or two disciplines, and we use both of those during a fight. And so you have certain fighters that are more skilled in boxing or wrestling or Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but they're not just focusing on that discipline. They're utilizing all of it to win. But again, that's still, even if it's not just one focus, it's still head and shoulders above what they were bringing out in like the early 90s UFC fights.
And I think that's an excellent point. I think Bischoff would have been able to hold his own against Vince in 98. Would he have beaten him or knocked him out? I don't know. But I'm just saying, if I'm getting in an argument with somebody and they're gonna, potentially rip my head off, I don't know what Vince would do. And
Yeah,
Vince
I think Vince
is a bigger guy.
Yeah, Vince is he's got the rage behind him too. I feel like he's the guy that get really mad.
Yeah, Bischoff might give me a roundhouse and knock me out. Vince might pick me up and throw me through the window of like Titan Towers or something. Who knows?
Right.
So the combo system, did you like that?
I don't think enough wrestlers had it to where like I'd be like, oh, that's really cool. I guess it was okay. I feel like that was one of those where they tried it out and it didn't really work out, and they never really brought it back again. Well, I mean, they didn't. This was the last WCW game, but did they bring it back for any of the WWF hockey games? I don't think they did.
And I don't recall it in WrestleMania or No Mercy.
No.
I mean, the only guy that I could think of would be Shamrock, and I'm pretty sure I played as Shamrock, at least in WrestleMania 2000. I'm not sure if he was in No Mercy.
He was unlockable in No Mercy.
Was he? Okay.
Yep.
I
like
didn't,
you could buy him.
I didn't particularly like the system. I think it made sense to give it to Glacier. I was disappointed when they gave it to Goldberg, but it was...
Yeah, because Goldberg really wasn't I guess that was his whole gimmick, because they always said, I remember reading this in Eric Bischoff's book back in the day, like they said, oh, you just copied Stone Cold Steve Austin. He goes, well, actually, no, I was trying to copy Ken Shamrock, is really what he was going for.
Really?
Yeah, you didn't know that.
No.
So basically he brought Goldberg in and like, okay, cool. Well, we're going to make this guy look like a legit, like, badass. But his first comparison, that's why I wore the gloves, was because they wanted to compare to like Ken Shamrock as like a cage fighter.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Makes a lot of sense.
So I can understand why they might have given that to Goldberg, because he did try to do some sort of like MMA during his fights, with the arm bars and things like that.
Leg
but,
lock. He had a rolling leg lock that was
awesome.
awesome.
A really good rolling leg lock. Yeah, I agree.
Very good.
So, I mean, I can kind of see why they gave it to Goldberg. I don't know what, I guess Mortis as well, Canyon. Like, did he didn't really do a lot of martial arts, did he?
I think maybe as Mortis he did more so than Canyon.
Okay. But still, like, that was a weird one, I thought.
Canyon was
Glacier, honestly, Glacier's the only one that made sense. I'm sorry, I agree though. Canyon, amazing wrestler. Yes. Oh my God.
Such a shame. Terrible.
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
Terrible thing. After I say this terrible thing, he's trying to move on after we know. And for those that don't know, unfortunately, Canyon took his life a number of years ago.
Yep.
Moving on, the Spirit Meter, and a change that they had brought in from World Tour was your Spirit Meter, when it got up to a certain level in World Tour, it would just automatically go into the special mode. Here, it waited. You had the opportunity to delay it, which was good for strategy, because if your opponent was vertical and you went to go taunt, because that's how you had to activate it, it gave the window to possibly attack. So if you want to knock them down, run away, that's a little thing that was changed. Stealing your opponent's special move, that was fun.
Yes, I had to look. I remember I learned how to do it, but only because I went to one of the cheat websites on like GameWinners.com to learn how to do it. And it was, I think, like when you grappled the wrestler, you hit A and B instead of the joystick.
Correct.
To do it, right? Yeah, that's okay.
And you could do it as anybody. So you could chokeslam the Giant as Rey Mysterio.
Yes, because there was no weight classes in this particular Aki game.
There wasn't, but it would have been really easy to do so, because they programmed, I almost call them Big Show, Paul Wright, Big Show, Giant, Captain Insano, whatever you want to call him. He, Nash, and I think Reese are the only guys that step over the top rope. So, I mean, It was kind of there, the weight class, but they didn't really go on about it.
Well, that was more height. That wasn't weight. That was height.
Yeah, but it could have. I'm just saying they did put some work into these guys being different. Going over
agree.
The top
no, I agree. And their stance was, kind of that brooding stance.
Which should have been the stance for everybody. That like their hands were kind of in a fighting position, not like, hey, look, I got nothing in my hands. You know,
He's just
police
holding your hands up.
Yeah, please tell you to stop, freeze. I got nothing in my hands. Are you showing me you got nothing in your hands? No, I'm just doing a WCW revenge pose.
Oh my
Makes
gosh.
no sense.
They did. I agree.
They were,
it was a little weird.
Yeah, that still strikes me as very weird, but it's kind of a funny, weird thing.
Well, and I think they fixed that in the WWF games, right?
They did, yes.
Okay, I thought
It wasn't as bad. But it's weird because you had, like you said, you had those guys in the game that had like the closed fits kind of thing. And I remember Raven had it too. So it wasn't just big guys. It was really random. Like, why did Raven have it?
Yeah, or it just, I agree. It just, I don't know what the logic was there by who stood a certain way or what have you. And you know what I did like too is we mentioned stealing finishers, but you could also steal taunts.
Yes.
And there were certain taunts that a wrestler would talk when you did them.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, if you played as Macho Man, for example, and he did his taunt, he would go, "Ooh, yeah!" Like that was his thing. But if you did somebody else doing his taunt, it would be a different sound effect.
I thought it didn't happen at all. So it would be another voice or just no voice at all?
No, it depends. Not everyone, but certain wrestlers would actually do their own voice. So, did you know Goldberg had a voice in this game?
No, I didn't.
If you taunt as if you're facing Macho Man, or I saw it also with Rick Steiner, because Rick Steiner does like the whoo whoo, he barks, right?
Yep.
But if you do that as Goldberg, he's like rah rah.
Now
like
now that you're saying it, I kind of remember stealing taunts against Rick Steiner. I know Sting does it too, but his is like a very like ow, like
yeah, like almost like
it's bad.
Yeah. So, but you could do that. I think you do that. That same woo comes out when you're doing the Macho Man taunt or the Rick Steiner taunt. So yeah. Fun fact. Certain wrestlers have their own little voice.
And it's very funny to take somebody like Goldberg or Ming, some legitimate badass, and you steal Disco Inferno's taunt. Or Alex Wright. Saturday Night Fever. So the finishing moves in this game were another big improvement. They had finishing moves in World Tour. They were very easy to do. Same thing.
They didn't look accurate, though, man. That's one thing I remember playing. I'm like, this isn't like the jackknife powerbomb that Kevin Nash is supposed to be doing.
It was just a regular powerbomb, but
it was a sit-down powerbomb, right?
I don't know if it was, but it was just a generic one. But even
I think so.
Bigger than that was, even before this, before World Tour, I remember playing WWF Raw, was it? Raw or Royal Rumble on Super Nintendo, and they were hidden. Like, you didn't know how to do a finishing move. And then Warzone and Attitude came out, and you had to remember how to freaking do an Hadouken to do Sweet Chin Music. It was ridiculous. And this was just get to the point, flip the joystick, strong grapple, flip the joystick again, done. That's it.
Yeah, I think this was, I agree, because I'm also thinking of the other WCW games like Nitro, which had, the original one came out on the PlayStation before this, and I remember, like, I couldn't figure out how to do a finishing move, and I had to look it up. It was just not easy to do, whereas, this was, like, the easiest one to do, and so, and not only that, but again, like, Revenge had more accurate-looking finishers compared to World Tour, but also, like, I don't know if it was the sound or just the animation, but the impact just looks so much more powerful. Like, to this day, I look at some of those moves they did, I'm like, oh, that looks brutal. There's, okay, so in your opinion, what were the most brutal-looking finishers in Revenge?
Well, I could tell you the first move I ever did in Revenge.
Okay. All right.
That's weird, because when we talked on the wrestling and or video game podcast, I think we had mentioned, like, do you remember playing it for the first time? I'm fairly certain I remember me and you getting the TNA game in college, and our first match was Samoa Joe and Sting. Yep. I don't know how I remember. Well, I do know how I remember. We were in college and best friends, and it was a brand new game. We waited a while for it to come out. When I booted up Revenge a couple of weeks ago, and actually booted up, not emulator, I actually got the system, found a way to freaking get this thing to hook up, because it doesn't work on newer TVs. So you gotta get a converter and da. But it's not bad. You can get them off Amazon for like $10. But when I booted it up, I had this flashback of first match I did was Goldberg. I picked Goldberg, and his running move is just a spear. And I remember going, whoa! Like,
I got my finisher already.
Yeah, like, wow. Because, man, coming from Warzone and Attitude, forget it. Jeez, that game was just terrible. Terrible. There was not much good in that game. I'm sorry, I really don't like them. And even with the ECW ones, as much as I freaking sugarcoat it, it's still the same crap. It's not that good. But I could justify it for ECW because less budget, less promotions, less money than WWF. But I do remember doing the spear for the first time and going, whoa, that, first of all, I did it. Second of all, it's a regular move. And then third, that shit looks like it hurts. So I remember, I mean, that's not even a finishing move. It's a regular move. It looked vicious. I know which one you're going to say, so I'm not going to mention it. The jackhammer looked brutal. Saturn's Death Valley Driver was brutal also.
Yep.
I remember playing as him a lot. And I'm trying to think if there's anybody else. Raven's Even Flow was fantastic also.
Yes.
And then, anybody else? No, that's all I got for right now. Go ahead. Give it to me. I know what you're going to say, Big Papa Pump.
No, I wasn't going to say Big Papa Pump.
I thought you were. Steiner Screwdriver?
I mean, it was brutal, but no,
Wow.
I'm surprised.
I purposely did not mention that.
No, I was like, oh, you know what it was? That's interesting. I'm curious now what you thought it was. So no, it was not the Steiner Screwdriver. To be honest, I forgot that was his finisher in the game because I never used him. No, there were two moves that I felt just looked the most brutal, with an honorable mention going to the Kevin Nash Jackknife Powerbomb, which again, it's a basic powerbomb, but the way he just drops him and you see him kind of bounce off the mat a little bit. But no, top two most brutal looking finishers in that game.
Can I interrupt before you give those? Because
yes,
full disclosure, we're recording on a Wednesday. And I have AEW on the background. And the Ocho, Le Champion, just came out. Jericho.
Oh,
the Lion
Chris Jericho.
Tamer in this game is brutal. The Lion
Yes.
Tamer in Revenge is brutal.
Well, that's what it used to look like back in the day before he went to WWE.
Before it became a Boston Crab.
Well, supposedly, I was going to say, like, Chris Jericho himself has said, like, there are two different moves. The Walls of Jericho is not the Lion Tamer. There are two separate moves. He has clarified
Yes,
that.
he has.
Because he couldn't pick up the bigger guys in WWF.
Yeah, and
to
I don't think Steve Austin would get the hell off me.
No.
There's
and
no
you
way.
You think of guys that like looked normal size in WWF, but you put them against Chris Jericho, and then all of a sudden they're towering over him. It's like, you're not going to get those legs.
He's not going to get Taker in that.
No, God, no. But, Boston Crab, a little bit easier to work with.
Yes.
So anyway, no. Okay. So my favorite two in neither order, they're both equally awesome in my opinion. One was the Diamond Cutter, DDP.
Oh, man, that's such a great move. And all the variations.
That was really cool about it is you could do it from everywhere. Every single position. Well, not every single, like you had to be standing up at least, but you could do it off of the turnbuckle. You could do it from behind. You could do it in the front. You could do it as an Irish whip rebound where you pop them up and then hit them with a Diamond Cutter. You could hit it from anywhere, and it just looked brutal.
And that went with the character of DDP because
yes,
at the start of Halloween Havoc 98, they're like, oh, it's the brute strength of Goldberg versus the unpredictability of the Diamond Cutter. He can get it from any angle. And this game made you feel like you were DDP.
Yes. Well, and again, I think but I think most of the wrestlers in that game, you had that feeling of playing as, before I get to my other favorite Impact finisher, the other wrestler that, again, made me feel like I was playing as him was Booker T. Because he had a lot of unique moves in this game as far as his I love Booker T. I think he's a fantastic wrestler. And now that I've been rewatching him on Reliving the War, the YouTube show, I really feel like he may be one of my favorite from WCW. And he just one of the coolest move sets ever. He was so unique in what he did. And so anyway, just a lot of his moves. And the fact that, honestly, I didn't know how to do it at first, and now I know how to do it. But like you could do a Spin-a-Rooney in Revenge.
Oh, yeah, you can. Absolutely.
You have to have your special up. And then I think if you fall down or you get knocked down, you spin a Rooney back up into your standing position.
He had the Harlem Hangover in the game. I don't know if that was a regular move off the top rope or
that was his. Well, because that was the thing. You could have a special from different things.
Oh yeah.
So his special was the Harlem Hangover. I think was it a special or was it just his diving move?
I don't know.
That's a good point. I can't remember.
But it's in the game.
It is in the game, and then of course he has his axe kick, which I've always loved. Anyway, so my other favorite move. This is my absolute favorite move, and I used it all the time because it's my favorite wrestler to play as in that game. Glacier's cryonic kick.
Really?
Because you hit that, it's not just a super kick. You kick that guy in the face and literally is lifted off the ground.
Really?
And flies back, and more often than not will get you into knockout territory where you've knocked him out.
Very Sub-Zero-esque.
Yes.
Finish him.
So Glacier, because of this game, has gone down as one of my favorite wrestlers of all time.
All right, there you have it. Maybe we should just end it right there. One of his favorite wrestlers of all time is Glacier. Glacier was different. He was unique.
He's awesome, man. He had one of the coolest movesets. I don't care what anyone says that he was a Sub-Zero ripoff. I don't care. I love Mortal Kombat. So if someone's going to copy a video game to be a wrestling character, I am so glad they went with Mortal Kombat.
What about Mortis Canyon as Reptile?
Was it Reptile or was it supposed to be Scorpion because of all the skulls?
Let's say he's a little bit of both.
because he was like supposed to be his rival, right? Whereas like Scorpion versus Sub-Zero, that was like the whole kind of gimmick of it. And then you had Wrath, who was like, I think he was more like Reptile because he showed up later.
Well, we'll get into Wrath in a moment.
Yes, we will. That's right.
So, a lot of finishing moves, different variations. Another good one, I'll just mention quick, is the Buff Blockbuster. That was like a legit finishing move from the corner. That was very cool that Buff Bagwell did. We talked about the entrances. They did change. When they came out, you had what was presented as the full stage, but when it cut to the match, it was downgraded. It was more than likely because of the amount of memory that was needed. But
yeah, I don't think it detracted from anything.
No, not at all. But did you know? Fun fact. Did you know if you are fighting in the aisles, or aisle, there's only one aisle, and you Irish whip your opponent towards the entrance and they go through the curtain, they'll disappear and come back, but sometimes they'll have a weapon.
I did not know that. Did you actually know that, or is that something you found out during research?
I completely forgot, found it in my research, I go, I remember. So that was something I don't think I ever tried it, to be honest with you. I don't think so either.
I do love that regardless of the match, you could go under the ring and pick up a weapon of some kind.
I wasn't under the I don't think it was under the ring. I think it was in the crowd.
Was it in the crowd? You're right, it was in the crowd. You reach over to the crowd and get a weapon.
Yep.
And I remember there was a stop sign, there was a baseball bat, I think there was
a chair,
a trash can. That might have been it.
And
but
Sting and La Parka started the match with weapons.
They started with weapons, and that's why I always love Sting too, because you start off with a bat. So you had a big advantage there. But it was no DQ. You couldn't get DQ'd in this game
unless you dropped it, and then it just disappeared into thin air.
Yes, and it didn't break either. So as long as you held on to it,
that I didn't like.
But you go get another weapon.
Yeah, it's the idea of it.
That's fair.
It's not the end of the world. But another thing they added, which was great, the 40-man battle/Royal Rumble. You got up to 40 guys. That was a lot of fun. I know I spent a lot of time with friends doing that. But, again, I'm an ECW guy. I made them fatal four-ways or four-way dances as well because you could turn off over-the-top rope eliminations. That was one of the downfalls of the game was there weren't a lot of match types. You had the single, the tag, the handicap, the Battle Royal, the legit Battle Royal Rumble. And then, if you turn off and tweak the settings, you can have a fatal four-way. Speaking of the Battle Royal, do you remember when Sting came in the match, he came from the rafters?
I feel like it's one of those things where, like, again, you said it, and then I remembered it. So, like, thinking about it back, I forgot, but I do remember that. Didn't he also do that when he would come and interfere in a match, too, though? Or am I just thinking because he would do that in real life?
No, I think he does it in the intro to World Tour. That might be what you're thinking of.
That might be. Okay. So, but I do remember, yes. So he would come down, when he would come out to the ring, he would come from the rafters, which was awesome.
That is cool. So here's the thing that blew my mind in my research.
Okay.
I can't confirm this because I found this so quick to us recording. I didn't have time to check another source. I've not tried it out on the system. I will this weekend when I boot it up just for shits and giggles. I read, and if this is incorrect, do not come at me because I'm just reading what I saw online. I read a report that if you hit the Z button during the Battle Royal, the CPU would take over your character. Like if you don't want to play for a little bit. If you got that.
Have you tried? So you haven't tried it yet?
No, I found this out today. So
okay.
I don't have the game where I am currently located, so I will where I am going to be this weekend, the game is currently at. So I will give that a shot. So I found that out today. So don't come at me if that is incorrect. But what I do know is correct, 60-plus wrestlers. And a lot of these guys in Revenge, the big names that were in it were not in World Tour. Bret Hart, Goldberg, Roddy Piper, Harlem Heat, Bulldog, Jim Neidhart, Conad. That's a joke, Conan. Kurt Hennig, Chris Jericho, Raven, and Saturn. So you got a little bit of everything. You got some new guys, homegrown, like Goldberg and Harlem Heat. You got Neidhart, Bulldog, Bret Hart from the WWF. You have, territory guys like Kurt Hennig, who were in the AWA and whatnot. Guys from Mexico. I mean, there's tons of luchadors in this game. Conan, Juventud Guerrera. And then you got some ECW guys like Raven and Saturn. So a little bit of everything. Very diverse group.
I'm trying to think. I mean, I feel like this may have been the most overall complete roster that represented a time that a wrestling game came out. I mean, even to this day.
We're going to get to that in a moment. We're going to get to that in a little bit. There's a big
I
got a big question for you at the end.
Okay.
Speaking of characters, though, EWF, DAW were original wrestlers. in this game. Original, in air quotes. But a lot of them were based off of New Japan, All Japan wrestlers such as Dr. Death Steve Williams, Hayabusa, and Kenta Kobashi. If I'm pronouncing his name wrong, again, my bad. But you were a fan of some of those wrestlers, were you not? That were
I was.
at the time
they were a
we
lot of
didn't know.
fun. I think it's funny because we were just talking before about the combos, and I think there was one of these original wrestlers that used the combo system. I think it was
Chi.
It wasn't Kimchi. There's another one I think then.
What?
I was going to say I think it was Hanzomon, the ninja-looking guy.
I think that's Otani, the ninja-looking guy.
Oh, maybe. I don't know Japanese wrestlers though. It's ignorant, but I don't really know any Japanese
It's okay.
wrestlers.
I just read it online. That's the reason.
Oh, okay. So, but yes. So I know there were others. Honestly, I'm trying to think who my favorite was to play as far as the weird ones.
It's probably the one that's the TV champion in my game.
Who is that? Do you
I
remember?
think it's Kimchi. That's why I said it.
I was gonna say. I think it was Kimchi because he had a really devastating looking.
Yeah, that guy. He made like sounds the entire time he fought.
He was awesome. And then actually, you know who I really loved too was Aki Man,
I've seen
aka Man, whatever. You
I've
call him.
seen people do taunts. I've seen gifs of indie wrestlers doing those taunts where he does like the spitting Hulk Hogan pose. Oh, it's great.
Yes. Well, but I remember his finishing move being pretty good too, right? I'm trying to think of what it was, but I remember it was like
It was pretty
he'd
crazy.
He picked you up and he'd spin around and he did something. But anyway.
So, yes or no? First of all, isn't AEW Fight Forever being made by THQ
yes.
or published by THQ? You think THQ Man's going to be in the game?
I think that would be amazing if he was. It'd be a fantastic.
Kenny
callback.
Omega's got his fingerprints all over this game. I think there's a very high probability THQ Man's in this game. If not, then he'll be some sort of like easily created wrestler.
Yes, like you can just add his outfit because you could do that. And I remember WWF No Mercy had his costume in there, so you could create your own version of him.
That's great. Speaking of creating, there was no creative wrestler in this, but the foundation was there. You were able to, and I had a lot of fun with this, alter the superstars in the game. Superstars. This isn't WWE. Superstars, as Joey Styles would say. The wrestlers, because they're wrestlers in a wrestling ring, and that's what wrestlers do. That was a funny Drew McIntyre promo.
Yes.
You could change things, which was really cool, and you could do things like you can give them other people's attires and kind of tweak it. Like I would make Macho Man, I would give him like his Mega Powers-esque, his short tights. Hogan, you were able to give Hogan his yellow and red, but you could tweak it. You can make it, NWO colors. You can give somebody Wolfpack colors or Hollywood Hogan NWO colors. It was pretty cool. Surfer Sting, I would always change his colors like every time I booted up the game. It was very fun.
Well, that's something we haven't talked about. So, like, all these wrestlers each had their own. They had 4 attire slots essentially.
That's a lot.
Some of them were just different colors for their main like outfits. But some of them, like Scott Steiner and Sting and Hulk Hogan and Macho Man, even were like previous gimmicks. Like in Sting's case, you had Crow Sting, but then you also had Surfer Sting
and Wolfpack Sting.
And Wolfpack Sting, and then Hogan had his red and yellow Hogan as an alternate attire. I'm trying. Scott Steiner, he had his bleach blonde goatee look that he was rocking at the time. But then one of his alternates is him with the brown hair as the Steiner brothers.
Yep,
Scott Steiner. So you could do like a tag team match with Rick and Scott Steiner, and didn't feel like you were having to pair up NWO Scott Steiner with Rick Steiner, which wouldn't have made sense at the time. So I'm trying to think of other wrestlers who had that much of a distinction between their outfits. Those are the big ones
what
that
was
I can
a
recall.
weird thing in the game? I thought was very strange.
What's that?
They had Lex Luger's Made in the USA outfit in the game, and it wasn't assigned to anybody, but it was in the game. Yes,
you could add it to him later.
Yeah,
I legit never knew that, or if I did, I don't remember it.
Yeah, I forgot about it in the research. I remember that, but Luger, I was one of the first guys because at the time with the Wolfpack, he was wearing the jeans. I didn't like that. It was stupid.
No. Well, was that his main outfit? I think I'd change it too because he had the trunks as his alternate.
Yeah,
so
I think he had the jeans as his default, but I changed. That was one of the first things I remember changing in the game. Another thing was, and WWF did this in WrestleMania 2000, and definitely No Mercy, but I'm not sure if they did it in 2000. But multiple characters or alternate egos in the same character, like you had Canyon, then you would hit the C button.
C down. It was C down. I remember that.
To change the character the way they looked, and it would be Mortis. And then back to Canyon and back to Mortis. So I remember they did that in a WWF game where you had like Jim Ross, Jerry Lawler, Michael Cole, like Earl Heb. They're all in one spot.
I know No Mercy did that.
Yeah.
Yep. It would save us. I guess it would save because it makes sense. You weren't expecting them to have a unique move set or whatever, so it made sense for them to basically just be 4 attire slots for one character and save on. I assume that probably saved on memory.
Oh yeah, definitely did. Definitely did.
I'm trying to think though in Revenge, other than Mortis and Canyon, was there anyone else that had that alter ego or alternate character swap?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think what you said was probably the closest thing was just gimmick changes, like not like fully different like Mortis, but you said the Steiners, the Steiner brothers.
I remember one that
Hogan.
was interesting. It wasn't a gimmick change, but like Scott Norton, one of his alternate attires had a shaved head.
Did it? Oh, it did. Yeah.
Because I'm wondering, is that when he was in Japan, or did he shave his head in WCW? I just can't remember.
I can't remember. I really can't.
Okay.
I remember he was with
Oh, well.
Buff Bagwell for a while.
He was the Vicious and Delicious. That was like most of '97 that they were a team.
Underrated.
Because, oh my God, they're fantastic.
Very, very underrated.
Mhm.
So now we're going to go into a little bit of the changes and removals from the game. There was actually not a lot. I think the glaring issue in this game, not glaring issue, one of the glaring omissions in the game was Ric Flair. So Flair was...
Yes.
And that's not fair to Flair. It is not fair to Flair that he was not in this game. So Flair was fired for no showing WCW Thunder early in its infancy. If my memory serves me correct, one of his kids had a wrestling tournament and he didn't want to go to a B show. So he was fired, and that was when the development of the game was happening. And then he got hired back, but it was in the later stages of the game, so he wasn't able to be in it. But I did this. A lot of my friends did this. Let me know if you've heard of this or you did it yourself. A lot of people, when I was a kid at least, would take Finley.
Yes, yes, I did, and I gave him Larry Zbyszko's tights.
And you just made it like purple or red, and then there you go.
Yes.
There's Ric Flair.
He's like, oh, he's looking a little more barrel-chested, and by God, he knows how to do a tombstone pile driver now, but that's Ric Flair, all right. I did it with other wrestlers, too, though. So I made, what was his name? Maya Inca Boy, one of the weird ones, like the fake ones. He kind of had a weird eyebrow raise, so he became The Rock for me.
Mayan Inca Boy. I'm trying to think.
So he was like a darker skinned dude. He had sunglasses on. He had a goatee. So that was the only thing that kind of threw you off. But he had like an eyebrow raise going on, and he had like tattoos and green shorts for his man attire. But then he could change that, and of course, no more tattoos. And so I just gave him like generic trunks, so he was The Rock.
Gotcha.
And then I remember, I'm trying to think. I think it might have been Sick Boy. No, was it Sick Boy? No, who was the one that didn't have the eye patch? It was Sick Boy, right?
Riggs. Scotty
yeah.
Riggs.
No, Riggs had the eye patch.
Yes, Scotty Riggs.
Sick Boy. Yeah, so I'm saying Sick Boy, the one who didn't have the eye patch, I would make into Triple H.
Really? Okay.
And, yeah.
All right.
So I just do like little things like that. But I remember the main one was Ric Flair. I would turn Finley. I'm sorry, I got a big smile on my face because that's hilarious that I'm not the only one who thought of that.
Did you change characters' names? Like
I of course.
I made Giant Big Show in the game.
I didn't do anything like cool, normal like that. I remember I specifically remember this because I took Lex Luger, and for one of his alternate outfits, I think I gave him pink pants and I called him Flexi Lexi. And then because that's when I was playing the game, that's what Hulk Hogan would call him at the time. And then I remember I gave him like one of these weird outfits that I think Dake Ken had, and I called him Lex the golfing wrestler because it looks like he's wearing a golf outfit. This stupid stuff like that. And so I'm trying to think of, and then I remember I had one like where I gave Kevin Nash like a t-shirt and jeans. I call him Coach Kevin because when I was watching WCW, he kind of came like a coach of some of the younger wrestlers as his gimmick.
I'm sorry if you.
So I called him Coach Kevin.
If you just heard my phone hit the table, I apologize. I think that happened twice.
Oh, you're
well.
good.
I'm saying that because my phone is blowing up because again, as we are recording this, I'm a huge Yankee fan, and Aaron Judge just broke the home run record. He was tied with Babe Ruth. So,
who did Aaron Judge
yes,
did?
He just hit number.
Oh, nice.
He just, according to my text messages, he just hit number 61 as we are recording this. So now, not only do you know the day we were recording this, you know the time we're recording this.
Yes.
So, I'll never forget. Where were you? If I ever have a kid one day, Dad, where were you when Aaron Judge beat Babe Ruth? Well, son, I was recording what was called a podcast
with your Uncle Dan.
And now, what's a podcast?
You don't think podcasts will be around when our grandkids are older?
I have no idea. Who the hell knows? Everything changes so
knows?
quick. VHS sounds like an STD now.
It really does. Yeah.
I got a case of the VHS.
There is a cure. It's called DVD.
Yeah.
Which in and of itself sounds like a different STD.
Okay.
So wait. So was Ric Flair the only one that wasn't in the game?
Wrath. You mentioned Wrath before with with Glacier and Canyon / Mortis. So he was in the game. Nobody really knows why he was removed. He is in the data of the game. You got to use a cheat device. I've seen photos of him. You can tell that the face resembles him, but he has Sting's like singlet like turned all black. I don't know if that's just what people assigned him or it was a placeholder for him, but he was in the game, but he was taken out. I mean,
Interesting.
I
Okay.
don't really know why. Nobody seems to really know why because he was at Halloween Havoc 98. I watched him. He fought Meng and he was all right. And there was nothing to write home about, but he's not in the game. And
So I just Googled
Yep.
him. I just Googled Wrath, and actually that is Brian Clark's face.
yeah, Brian Clark is Wrath.
Or Brian Adams, excuse me. It's Brian Adams' face with Sting's outfit.
It's weird, right?
That's very weird.
Very weird.
But I guess he's got a moveset that's unique. I never used him. I never had a Game Shark for the
Did you ever have a
N64.
Game Shark in general?
I did for the PlayStation 1, actually. And I'm trying to think if I ever used it. The only time I used it was when I would play Tekken 3. I would use it to unlock all the characters.
Cheater. It's okay.
I'm not cheating.
allow
I got there faster. There are certain characters that so like with Tekken 3, you would unlock characters by beating arcade mode, which was fun. That was fun. But there were certain characters you could only unlock in other modes of the game that I didn't play as much, and so I couldn't be bothered. So I'm like, I'm just going to unlock these characters.
I remember renting Game Shark, but I never owned it, but I do remember trying to figure out what the heck to do. And if you didn't have like that book of codes or find a way to know what you were doing, it was rather difficult. But
Yeah.
finishing up this part here with the development changes and removals, they did remove the tournament mode that was in World Tour, but that was replaced by the championship mode. But you really couldn't do it. You couldn't do the championship mode with 2 players unless it was in the tag team, so you couldn't do any type of tournament. Considering all the things that were put into it, if the worst thing that was taken out of World Tour and not put in Revenge was tournament mode, I don't think anybody would have a really big issue with
Well,
it.
and that's the thing. You can make a tournament yourself, right? You don't need to have that be in the game. You can make your own bracket and then just play it as such, right? I mean, I agree. I don't think that's a huge omission.
I agree. I don't think that was a big deal at all, but I just want to let everybody know. So here we go. Discussion, memories, all the good stuff. I want you to, I want to be a polite host. Ha.
Okay.
What are your memories when you think of WCW Revenge? What do you think of?
So I can tell you exactly what I think of because I remember who I got it from my neighbor Shane, who we had just gotten a Nintendo 64 and he let us borrow the game. We had played it at his house first, and I said, "This is amazing." He goes, "Oh, we don't really play it if you want to borrow it." And I said, "Yeah, sure." Borrowing it ended up being keeping it, like we never gave it back. But this was in 2000 because I remember I had already been watching WCW, but it was 2000, so a lot of the wrestlers that were in this game, I didn't know who they were because they weren't in WCW anymore. And so, like, I thought it was really weird that Chris Jericho, this WWF wrestler, was in a WCW game. I had no idea Jericho was in WCW when I played this game. Like, zero idea, because by the time I got into it on, watching it on TV, he was gone.
So
and
did
I
it
had no
blow
idea.
your mind?
I was really confused. I was like, and then so on the flip side, I remember watching Chris Benoit in WCW, and then I remember he went away, and then I remember the next time I watched it, Chris Benoit was over on the WWF. I'm like, what's going on? This is really weird. Why is this happening? So anyway, I remember playing with my brothers, and I remember I would get so pissed at my one brother Adam because he would play as DDP, and all he would do in every match is spam the running punch button.
I remember you telling
Because
me.
with DDP, oh my God, I don't know if it was a forearm or if it was a legit punch. I can't tell from the animation, but if you hit that enough in a row, you would legit knock out the wrestler, and you wouldn't have to hit a single finisher. You wouldn't have to pin the guy. He would be knocked out. And so it was the easiest way. It was the easiest and it was the cheapest way to win because it was just like you couldn't really avoid it. Like anytime I went to like try to land some offense, he would run at me with that freaking punch, and I couldn't. I could block it, I guess. I didn't think about that, but still, like. It sucked. Like, I think we made a rule, like, no running at somebody is DDP. I think we had to make that a house rule because that's how stupid it was. That was like, you could just win that easily. And then I remember we would always play the battle royals, like you mentioned, the 40-man battle royals. And what I liked about them, too, it wasn't like a traditional Royal Rumble. Like, once the guy was thrown out of the ring, the next guy came in. So it kept moving. And so, and then if you had multiple guys knocked out at the same time, you would have multiple wrestlers running into the ring. And remember, they would zoom in on their face when they're running in the ring. They just look really creepy.
Yep.
They would get in the ring. And so I remember doing that. I remember the easiest way to win those battle royals was you throw the guy on the outside of the apron, and then you just run into the ropes, and it bounces him off the fence.
Yep.
And that's how you knocked him
That
out.
was
Super
cool,
easy
too.
to
That
do.
was something I think I overlooked in this was that little piece of the game.
The animation?
The
Oh,
getting
it's brutal.
thrown from the apron of the ring and landing on the guardrail, and the sound. It sounded brutal.
It did. Well, everything, the sound effects in this game, man, were I mean, top notch. Like, it just sounded great. It looked, for the time, looked great. So anyway, so those are probably my big memories of playing it. It was always with my brothers. We would usually do one-on-one matches. I didn't really do a lot of tag matches. I wasn't a huge fan of them. I honestly never have been a huge fan of tag team wrestling matches. They're just not my cup of tea. But the singles matches were great. Again, I always used Glacier. I thought he was awesome. And like you, I'm like, wait, Goldberg just does his spear. Like, I don't think it like blew my mind as much, but like the fact that you could, I think what I loved is I wanted to play a game as Goldberg where it would be like real life, where he could just win a match in 2 minutes and just get his finisher. There were other games where like you had to wear down their health in order to pull off a finisher. I think Nitro was one of them. Whereas this one, like you could theoretically just taunt until you got your special up and hit one spear and a jackhammer, and it almost felt like you were playing a TV show match. So I thought that was really cool. Other than that, trying to think. I remember I was really confused that Hulk Hogan and Ultimo Dragon had the same taunt. I was like, why is Ultimo Dragon doing the
yes,
thing
that
with the
was
hands?
kind of weird that Ultimo Dragon would do that back in the day.
Did he do that in real
He did.
life? He did. Okay. So and I wasn't watching at the time. So I remember there was Rowdy Piper did a really weird hopping taunt, which I didn't understand what it was until I watched Reliving the War, and it was to show that he could jump on his one leg that had hip surgery. That was the only reason that taunt was in that game.
And then he was crazy.
So I remember that. And then he was nuts. That's how I know him. He was crazy. So those are probably my big memories from that game. I do remember making Booker T world champion at one point because he was world champion on WCW TV at the time that I was watching. Yeah, I mean, just all in all, a fantastic game.
I agree with a lot of what you said. I did do a lot of tag matches with friends, and the big thing was in '98. First of all, I thought this game came out a little bit earlier. I had my years off when I was doing the research. I thought World Tour was 96 and this was 97 because I had forgotten about the Wolfpack and everything.
Yep.
So I had my years off a little bit. This was getting towards the I don't want to say downward spiral in 99. I think WCW was a downward spiral in 2000 when Russo kind of came on board. But things were...
That kind of started in 99.
Yeah, it started in 99, but it got bad, in my opinion, in 2000. So I was a little surprised that this came out so close to when it started to go downhill. But the thing was, it was so hot. Like, wrestling was so hot. Everything NWO, Steve Austin, that little rebel group out of Philly. Everything was so freaking red hot. Everybody I knew liked it. You know, I played sports. I was in basketball. I was in baseball. And then... you know, you had the guys that were really into it, and then the surprising thing was, even if you weren't into wrestling, a lot of guys had N64 for the sports games and whatnot. I mean, I felt like I was one of those kids that fit in with both. I mean, I would sit there and I would play, you know, I had Ken Griffey Jr. Baseball, I had Madden on N64 also, had the wrestling games, obviously. And then there would be the ones that wanted to play the fantasy games, like I consider Mario a fantasy game and stuff like that, Star Fox. So, if you were just into sports, you still played this game. If you were just into Mario and Star Fox and stuff like that, you still played this game. Maybe you didn't own it, but you still played it. Everybody...
Well, that was me. Like, I didn't play sports games, but I played fighting games, and that's what this felt like to me. It was a fighting game.
Everybody played this game. And that's the difference between, I feel, and maybe it was just my friends, maybe it was just our age bracket. This and WrestleMania 2000 were the peak. Now, I'm not saying that No Mercy is not a better game. Everybody has their own opinion on it. But for my bubble, my age group, this was it. Revenge and WrestleMania were the two games that absolutely everybody played. And, you know, there's something about this game that when I boot it up, it's the reason why we do these shows. Whether it's the YouTube thing that we're starting now, the podcast itself, just the general idea of us doing these is a retrospective. So when I turned on that game, without even looking at anything in detail, just watching the intro where they have Ming as the truck driver, as you pointed out in the intro.
Yeah.
Just watching that and the flood of memories of NWO and Hogan and Goldberg and DDP and all that stuff. That's one part of it. Playing it, that's the second part of it. Like, oh, I remember playing it. Actually, my friend Dan, not you, Dan, and not the other Dan that's on our shows, another Dan. Like, seriously, my entire life has been with Dans. I thought I would eventually marry a Danielle. So, just playing it, I get the flood of emotions of those, 98, 99 years. And then it something like, wow, I completely forgot about this. When you do the championship mode, you get a high score and you put in your name.
You do, that's
Talk
right.
about a friggin' time capsule. When I look through those names, and I have people from middle school, people from high school, people I hung out with once or twice, and their names in my game, goddamn, that is a time capsule. And that is why I'm more devoted to Revenge and WrestleMania 2000 than I am No Mercy, because once I got in high school, I was like, I really don't want to play N64 anymore. You know, what else is going on? So that was my memory of it. And it's one of the strongest, if not the strongest, memory I have for a video game. So that
I will say, I mean, between this one and No Mercy, I do feel No Mercy was the superior game overall, but I did not play that with my brothers. Like, this is the game that I played with my brothers all the time. By the time No Mercy came out and I actually played it, I played it by myself. It was great, but my brothers weren't really into it at that point. So that was all me. And then I think you and I played it eventually as well. But as far as with my own family growing up, yeah, Revenge was the pinnacle. And then I remember playing WrestleMania 2000 at my friend's house, another friend's house in middle school, and I thought it was great. I remember my first match, I was China, just because I thought it was really cool that you could be a chick in a game and beat up dudes. And she had that low blow that you could use, you know. Yeah, I think I played that game before I played Revenge, funnily enough. And I loved it. I thought it was awesome. This is amazing. And then I played Revenge, and I'm like, this plays a lot like that WrestleMania game for some reason, even though it's a different company. What's that all about?
strange.
It's crazy. But no, man, fantastic memories. Easily on as far as NXT, if I were to ever get another N64, or if I'm playing on an emulator, there's very few games I will go back and feel like I would legitimately enjoy on the Nintendo 64. This is easily one of those games, though, that I would thoroughly have a great time going back and playing it again.
I agree with you. So jumping into our next section of this, what did you like about the game? What did you dislike? Is there anything that you recall that you didn't like, or just you felt like even for back in the day they could have done?
I mean, we've been definitely talking about, you know, a lot of what we loved about it. So I mean, there's not much more to say on that. I mean, the gameplay was crisp. The presentation was amazing. The sound effects were on point. The roster, you really can't complain about the roster. Honestly, the only thing I feel like was lacking, and I feel like it's just because it really wasn't, you know, popular at the time, was like the create a wrestler mode. You couldn't create your own wrestler. You could do like the attire, you know, swap and customization as far as colors and things like that, but it was still the guys that were in the game. Even though you could change their names, it was still the guys that were in the game. You couldn't make a separate slot, and that's where I think No Mercy, especially, I think WWF had it, but I never did it on WWF. But you know, No Mercy, I think, really had that true create a wrestler, bring them into the game. So that's probably the only thing I feel like was lacking. Everything else that they left out, whether it was entrance music or whatever, you know, I don't really care about. Like, to me, it was just such a perfect wrestling game that none of that other stuff really mattered. They got everything right that they were supposed to get right, and so whatever they left out, I give a pass to, including for that matter, the create a wrestler mode. It's more so if I had to pick something they could add, that would be the only thing.
I agree with everything you said. My one addition is that I really liked was the instant replay. I thought that was awesome.
Yes. Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about that. You could, like, as soon as you hit the guy, like if you hit like a really good clothesline or a boot to the face, it would replay. And then certain times you would hit like just a generic wrestling move, it would do that. In addition to like your finishers, it would always do a replay.
Yep. And then after the match, it would show you like the last 20 seconds, 15 seconds, whatever it was,
like how you won the match.
Yeah, which was really cool. The music thing, that does bother me because, like, you know, you have the factions in the game. You have NWO Hollywood, Wolfpack, Ravens Flock, which had been broken up at the time because in Halloween Havoc 98, they mentioned that the Flock is disbanded.
Yep.
You could have had literally everybody in NWO Hollywood, NWO music. Everybody in the Wolfpack music. Everybody in Ravens Flock, Ravens thing. And then even if you went with, you're in WCW and you get the generic Nitro music, I felt like it could have been.
That's true.
Yep.
That's a good point. I think they did that for, actually, I believe it was WCW Thunder, it was Thunder on the PlayStation, where you had those video entrances, and not everyone had their own music. Some wrestlers did.
That's unexcusable
but if not,
on a PlayStation console.
Oh, I would agree. Yeah, certainly a lot more memory. You should have had more music, but it could have been a licensing issue for all we know. I don't know. But no, I agree. I think they probably could have, you know, honestly, I feel like they could have done without a few of the wrestlers in like the fictional federations if they could have used that memory for music instead. I don't know how development works. I don't know if those are even like interchangeable, but if taking out some of those fake wrestlers meant you could get some of that music, yes, I think that would have definitely added an extra layer. It wasn't a game breaking thing for me, but I can definitely see not having it versus, especially in future games on this engine, having that feature. I can understand why it would have been nice to have.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I'm agreeing with you a lot about this stuff. But we both think it's a great game. And then, there's not much to complain about. I think it still holds up. So what's your thoughts on the legacy of this? When you look back at this, 20 some odd years plus later, what do you think when you think of Revenge? What do you think of, if and when eventually you boot it up? Like, what do you think this legacy is of this game to you, and then just to the wrestling audience and video game enthusiasts as well?
So I think you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier when you were talking about how AEW is putting out a game, and they're using this as essentially kind of the blueprint for how they want it to be made. Kenny Omega, huge into video games. It's kind of his gimmick, but he is like he's playing a big part behind the scenes in getting this game made, and he was a huge fan of the WCW and the No Mercy, the WWF Aki games. But I feel like that in and of itself is, all because of these games. So this, whatever the game that's coming out, it's going to be inspired by this game from the mid 90s. And so I think, to me, again, it honestly, what it did for me was it helped me really understand the storylines that were going on when I went back to watch earlier WCW stuff on the WWE Network or on probably YouTube or whatever. But it was like it gave me a really good feel for who was in what group and what was a wrestler's finishing move. And so when I would see it on TV, I'm like, oh, okay, I know, like I could watch, I played this game and I played as Glacier and I'd never seen him wrestle. So when I finally watched Glacier wrestle, I was waiting for him to hit that cryonic kick because I knew that was his finishing move. And so when he hit it, I'm like, all right, it's over. So this to me was like almost like an interactive wrestling encyclopedia for WCW, as far as like, you had, what the guy looked like now, you knew how he wrestled, because I feel like the wrestling movesets were very accurate. You knew what faction they were in. So I feel like this was, you mentioned here in the notes that we've got, a time capsule, and it's all that. And then for me, it was also kind of a resource for understanding what WCW was like when it truly was at its peak.
Yeah, that's, again, I keep sounding like a broken record. That's it. I mean, you learn the wrestlers, even if you didn't know who they were. If you weren't watching the show, maybe you started to watch the show because of the game, and it was that big. 1.8 million units in the United States. I don't have a worldwide number. I was not able to retrieve that number, but 1.8 million in the United States for a company in 1999 was not doing its best business. It was gearing towards those bad times. So that speaks volumes for where WCW was, in early to mid 98, where the wrestling business was in 98, and just the structure and execution of the game was just fantastic. I mentioned that this is a time capsule for me personally, with those names in the saved data of the game. But if you think about it, this game came out in 98. 98, 99, 2000. How many wrestling games between WCW, WWF, ECW, I think I don't think the Backyard Wrestling games came out, but just between those three. No,
they were after WCW folded.
Just those three organizations. It was a lot of games. And we
probably close to 10 games.
We still talk about Revenge with this, rose-colored glasses, maybe, but I still think it holds up. Now, I want to end on this. You mentioned this before, and I was kind of hoping you didn't.
Okay.
Is this the greatest video game wrestling roster of all time? Now, when I say that, we're not going to count, any game that has DLC or created wrestlers or created wrestler templates that are in the game. Just you get the game, you put it in your system, and it boots up. Is this the greatest roster of a wrestling game of all time?
No.
I agree.
Oh, really? I figured you were going to be surprised.
No.
I mean, I'm going to say
it's up there.
It's fantastic. It is amazing. But is it the best roster in a wrestling game? Absolutely not.
Do I dare?
But I have a game in mind.
Yes. Can I go for it? Can I take the guess?
Yeah, or if you have one too.
I think it's Here Comes the Pain.
Nope.
Okay. I'm a little surprised by that.
Okay.
All right. Is it Shut Your Mouth?
Nope.
Wow. Okay. Now I'm really intrigued. I have a dark horse.
Okay.
WrestleMania 19.
Nope.
Okay, I give up.
It is WWE 2K14.
Okay.
And that was the one that had the 30 years of WrestleMania mode.
Is that the one that's really heavily with the DLC, not the DLC, but unlockables for the Attitude Era?
No, that was WWE 13. WWE 14 was literally you had showcase matches from every single WrestleMania leading up to WrestleMania 30 as the culmination where Daniel Bryan won the World Heavyweight Championship.
I don't acknowledge
And so-
WrestleMania 30 though.
Why?
Undertaker lost.
That's fair.
Terrible decision.
That's fair. It's hard to get past that. I
It is.
understand. But no. So anyway, no, I believe that was the greatest roster because you had wrestlers from the 80s all the way to the 2010s. And so to me, that is the best roster. Now, if you're asking the best roster that represented a company during the time that it came out, if that was
kind of what I was
if that's
going
your
for.
question,
Yes.
then that's different. I would have to say probably you already mentioned it, but I would say Here Comes the Pain.
Yeah, I should have worded that a little bit better. I mentioned DLC, but Legends, so to speak, I wanted to exclude from this as well.
Okay, that's
so
fair.
my apologies on that. That was what I was going for when I mentioned no DLC. I should have clarified that. But bear with me. It's the first time I'm hosting this and probably the last time
That's
now.
right.
Got it. Noted.
No,
but
good.
would you would go with Here Comes the Pain?
I would say top wrestler. So my top 5 rosters in a wrestling game that pertain to the era in which it came out. You have Here Comes the Pain. You have Shut Your Mouth. I agree. Those two are fantastic. You've got WWF No Mercy, another one where, yeah, there were some wrestlers left out, but again, I think it gave you a pretty good idea of what was going on TV at the time. You have WCW Revenge. So I would say those 4. And then honestly, the only other one I can think of that really stands out is SmackDown versus Raw 2006.
You're not going with my wild card of WrestleMania 19.
I feel like that roster was tiny, though. I feel like there's a lot of folks missing from that one.
It was a smaller roster, but if you look at it, it's the first game with Goldberg, and
That's correct.
and Scott Steiner.
Yep.
And so you have the WCW, and Hogan's in it too. So you get,
But again, that's going back to that's not complete roster. That's okay. Overall roster was awesome. In which case, you go back to my argument that 2K14 had all these wrestlers that weren't previously in games, like the Ultimate Warrior, for example.
well, these guys
So-
were active at the time, though.
That's fair. That's fair. But again, it wasn't the most complete roster.
No. I'm just saying in terms of it had the reason I say WrestleMania 19 and Shut Your Mouth is because if we're talking about this era, Attitude Era, NWO era, Extreme Era, those 2 games had a little bit of everything.
You are absolutely, yeah. You could legit, those are the first games where you could have WCW versus WWF versus ECW matches and like have like wrestlers. So like, yeah, you mentioned Shut Your Mouth. You could have Hulk Hogan, like Hollywood Hogan and Ric Flair and Scott Hall, or not Scott Hall, he wasn't in the game. Kevin Nash against Triple H, Stone Cold, The Rock. You know,
Yep.
I would do that honestly for many years. I would do that with in game. I would always have like big, shows where you had the WCW guys, like DDP was another one that was in that game. Booker T. You could have all these guys that were for the first time playable in these matches. You could put them against guys that were still around that were hot during the WWF Attitude Era, which I thought was really cool. Same thing. And again, I wasn't into ECW, but I agree. There were a lot of, not a lot. There was definitely a good handful. I mean, I'm thinking Tajiri, Taz, and RVD were probably the big 3 you were thinking of as far as ECW guys in a game.
Talking about WrestleMania 19, Dawn Marie's in it. Get out of here.
Oh, that's right. Dawn Marie. You do love Dawn
I do
Marie.
love Dawn Marie. But she's not the reason why I'm saying WrestleMania 19. It is, like you just said, it's Van Dam, it's Tajiri, Taz, the Dudleys, along with the WCW influx, Hogan, Flair, Goldberg, Steiner, and then WWE's new stars. It was the first game Cena was in, Lesnar was in it, American Badass, Taker was in it. So you had that hodgepodge of each group from this era that Revenge was coming from, jumbled into a game, and you have that engine from Revenge and No Mercy that went onto the GameCube, which is the legacy and the WrestleMania games, although not the best. I'm not comparing WrestleMania 19 or 18 or even the Day of Reckoning games on GameCube to these N64 games, but they're similar. You can definitely feel the influence. Maybe we're going to have that type of influence with the AEW game. Maybe it's going to be a little bit more true to the N64. We'll find out, but that's how I viewed it, that these were the legacy games after N64.
So when does the AEW game come out? Do you remember?
I believe it comes out. Jeez.
They say, I think it's this year, right?
No, it's soon. I don't know if it's
Okay.
in time for the holiday surprise or right after surprise gift cards. It's coming out soon. It's just that, it's a lot.
I just want them to get it right, though. Like, I don't want it to come out like sooner and then suck. Like, I want them to polish it up and put out a good
Have
game.
you seen the videos of it?
I
It
have,
really
and
does
I-
look like it moves like these N64 games.
It does, but I also think that could be bad too. Like, I'm really hoping that it doesn't feel clunky. But if it's got the polish of a new game and has the feel of one of those games, I think they got a winner on their hands. Now, they've also included some weird stuff in that game, like mini games, which I'm like, like literally you can play like Mario Party games in that game.
Really?
Yeah, you didn't know
No.
that? It looks weird. Like there's like a home run derby thing you can do with Kenny Omega and all these other wrestlers. So I don't know how I feel about that, and I hope that doesn't take away from the other. Honestly, my favorite part of any wrestling game, and I think you'll agree, I mean, the gameplay is great. Honestly, for me, it's Create a Wrestler mode. That is like the ultimate, like, if a wrestling game does not have a good Create a Wrestler mode, there's a good chance I'm not going to play it for very long.
I got you. Those mini game things sound a little weird. While you were talking, I don't see a date for Fight Forever from AEW. It's listed as 2022. Considering, again, time of recording, Aaron Judge has hit his 61st home run. If it is coming out in 2022, it's going to be probably in December. If not,
we're entering Q4 here, so I mean, if they haven't announced it yet, it's probably going to be very close to the end of the year. Unless they're like ready and they surprise us. But I feel like that would be bad business.
Yeah, and again, we're nostalgia, but since this game that's coming out now is going to directly tie into, or it seems like it's going to directly tie into what we reviewed today with a very strong influence, or just flat out influence, because that's what Kenny Omega has said. There are those issues in AEW right now with Punk and the Young Bucks and stuff like that. Those are names I thought I would never mention, on Generation S, but since we're talking about it briefly, that might be an issue. And, Punk is on the cover. We don't know what's going on with him.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that. You're right. He is on the cover.
If he does get released or he does walk away on his own terms, you got to redo all that box art. I don't know if it's been produced yet. All the marketing materials. Do you take him out of the game? What happens to the revenue to him from the game? Do you hide him as a secret character? Things like that. Same thing with the Bucks and Omega. You don't know. I mean, I don't think those guys are going.
Well, the Bucks and Omega, I don't think they're going anywhere. I think that's going to be perfectly fine. They'll be back sooner than later. Punk, I don't know. I feel like, they've put so much into making him like the face of AEW, or at least one of the faces of AEW. I feel like something like the game art cover they can switch. That's not a big deal. But as far as just including him in the game, I mean, at this point,
because Cody's in the game apparently.
Oh, is he really? Yeah. I mean, if Cody's in the game, then Punk should be in the game. It's not like he did anything like heinous. It's
Punk,
not like including him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you're putting Benoit in a game. Is what I'm saying. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like, he was kind of a dick, and what he did was very unprofessional from a business standpoint.
Oh, look at you foreshadowing things.
We'll talk about that in a minute. But I think you could include him in the game, and it's all done already, so you might as well. Obviously, he won't be in future games, and to be honest, I would be surprised if he shows up in a wrestling company ever again at this point.
I agree.
I think he's done. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
I agree with you. I would bite the bullet, keep him on the cover, because if you're...
Oh, you would keep him on the cover, too?
I would.
Okay.
Because he's going to generate interest. He's a lightning rod. And even if you've been out of wrestling for the last 10 years, you know who CM Punk is. So if you see him on the cover, and the rest of the cover is him, Omega, who obviously deserves it, Moxley, who's Dean Ambrose, WWE, Jericho, Jade Cargill, I think is her name.
Yep.
And then my new boo, I mean, she's not Dawn Marie, but Dr. Britt Baker is. She's lovely. She's a heck of a wrestler. Her outfits are really cool. And I actually mean that they're actually really cool. Not like, they're cool. Like, no, they're really like cool things that she wears. And she's a hockey fan, so she's A-okay with me. Okay. So we talked to AEW a little bit there. Didn't think we're going to go there.
We did. Maybe we'll review that in the future if we get that game.
You know, I think that would be. If it goes with, we've discussed it, it's going to have that influence. And if it does have the influence, I think it's worth talking about. And if it doesn't,
Well,
I don't think I think
yeah.
it's worth talking about also because, like you said, Omega and THQ Ukes have really built this up to be what I described the GameCube games to be, a legacy of the N64 games. They're
Yep.
building it up like, if you liked Revenge, No Mercy, they always say No Mercy. If you
Yeah.
like those, you're going to like this. Well, then let's go for it. Let's try it.
Yeah.
And if it's great, awesome. If it's not, then maybe it's awesome in a different way. But it certainly would warrant a conversation, in my opinion.
Well, and I think that all boils down to, so, when I started the Generation S podcast a few months back, the goal was, it was a podcast about growing up in the 90s and early 2000s. And that's still true. But at the same time, I'm thinking, okay, who is our audience for this podcast? And really, I think the target is anyone who did grow up during that time period. But you know what? We did grow up. And so I think it's important to talk about things that are happening sometimes in modern times, or in this case, a video game that came out recently that harkens back to a time when we were still growing up. I think that's where it's still relevant. Or, for example, doing a movie review on a movie that came out recently that maybe was a remake of a movie we saw back in the day or something, you know what I mean? Or a TV show. So, I'm trying to figure out, like, what's the magic formula for this podcast of, like, okay, I want to reach out and appeal to people that grew up and graduated high school around the same time as I did and experienced the same things as I did, and sometimes forgot about some of the things that we did as a shared experience. But I think that also can come into play of, like, okay, talking about modern things. I think those things will still appeal to that same demographic, to coin our college professor at radio school. Demographics, that was always the big thing. So, but I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you feel like I feel like we could talk about modern things as long as they tie back to something we could experience from, growing up?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
one of the good things about having this show, other shows that we have lined up, and, Dan kind of hinted at them a little bit, and we're going to go over those in a few moments. The one good thing about YouTube is the ability to hear or see what people think. One of the bad things is to hear and see what people think also.
Yes.
Because everybody's is brave behind a keyboard, but you got thick skin, and, we know that this is a slow process of building what we hope is an actual fan base. And, I believe Dan has touched on this the very first episode. This is more of a passion that we have. If we can make a couple or, some beer money off this, that would be great. But, just to interact with people and see what they want, and comments and suggestions of future episodes, or what you like and what you don't like, and things like that will certainly help us. And, we're definitely open to the input, want to hear what everybody wants. And Dan, do you want to, discuss briefly before we wrap this up about some other shows that, you mentioned that this video game show is going to have some other guests on it, but the shows that me and you are going to do, for the most part.
Yeah.
Do you want to go over those two things?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So obviously I'll probably be back on future episodes of, I don't know what we're calling it yet. We've toyed around with some ideas like Long Island Lou Reviews. Like, that could be the name of this segment of the show, but that's not set in stone. Anyway, the point being is that, just again, reiterating that putting these shows up on YouTube is a way for us to do a deeper dive on certain topics that you've asked for. So I've had friends that have said, oh man, like, I know you were just talking about video games in that one episode, but I really loved it when you talked about the wrestling games. Well, check out the YouTube channel. We're going to have deep dives on some of these topics that people have wanted to hear more about. This is one of them. The other one, getting to your point, is going a little bit deeper on pro wrestling. Looking at our download numbers, pro wrestling is still, and it's by a country mile, still the highest downloaded episode on the entire podcast, at least at this point, September 2022. So that could change eventually. Who knows? Maybe we'll hit it big and, all the other ones will get a bunch of downloads too. But until then, I mean, we're talking like more than double most of the other episodes as far as downloads. So, we've talked about this before, and I think I even mentioned this in the wrestling episode of the podcast. Like, we met because of pro wrestling, so we obviously talk about it pretty much all the time. I mean, to the point where whenever I text you, the first thing I say is, "Hey, yo, Chico," after Scott Hall. Like, that's just what I do now. I've been doing that for, God, it's got to be 10 years at this point that I've been doing that.
Yep.
So we are going to, as part of the deep dives that we're doing here on the YouTube channel, is we're going to dive a little deeper into the world of pro wrestling, but not just, I mean, it could be like, reviewing matches. It could be talking about certain wrestlers. But one of the shows we had an idea for, in fact, Lou had this idea. So I'm going to let you explain it, Lou, but we're calling it the professional view of wrestling. So why don't you tell everyone what that's all about?
So I'm going to use, because this is a topic we just discussed with the Young Bucks and Punk. I'm going to use that as an example because that doesn't fall into the time period of Generation S. But, this might be a good time to go over and use that as an example. We're not going to so much go over things that we would change in wrestling in terms of, let's rebook this, let's move these guys around, let's change this guy to a good guy or a bad guy. Dan mentioned, when we had just a few minutes ago, when you had the games come out, you can have Hogan versus Austin and Van Dam versus Flair and, the greatest diva of all time, Dawn Marie versus Trish Stratus. I kid. It's not going to be like that. We're going to be looking at things from the professional side. And the reason I got the idea for the show is because of what's happening in AEW right now. I'm not going to rehash it too much, but, I just mentioned that there was an incident with CM Punk and the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, and has the wrestling fans really divided that I feel like a lot of them still put on the rose-colored wrestling glasses, like, yeah, Punk punched him, good for him, they shouldn't have done this, they shouldn't have done that. It's like, well, not really, because they're his boss, regardless of what the Bucks said or Omega said or how they went into the room or whatever the innuendo, whatever the rumor and innuendo is. Shout out to somebody. They're still your boss, and they have an EVP title. And if you're a professional and you're on a conference call with work and you badmouth the VP or the EVPs of your job in front of the CEO of the company to investors or your paying audience, when you're done with that conference call and you're walking back to your office, you're done. Regardless of your upper management, middle management, if you're making fun of your superiors in a company, you're done. So that's where the idea for this show came up, was a more deeper dive into the business of pro wrestling.
Yeah.
And
well, because we've both worked corporate jobs, so we understand. We never worked in the wrestling business, I'll grant you that, but we understand how human resources works, or how most corporate organizations are structured. And I feel like wrestling, is, at least in this day and age, is really no different. They're businesses,
yes.
They're corporations. So yeah, we're kind of attacking it from that perspective, and we're going to talk about booking and how we could have booked things differently to maybe from a business perspective. But in general, it'll be looking at it from that perspective. I just said perspective like 10 times.
It's okay,
but
it's a light. It's a light view. Like there might.
It's a light view.
There's going to be light rebooking. We're not going to redo. And I'm a wrestling dork, and I called Dan one day, like, dude, I couldn't sleep one night, and I completely rebooked the Montreal Screwjob for weeks. And I don't think people want to hear that. I mean, because, like Dan said, we're not from the wrestling industry. Now, we've had corporate jobs. I've helped TNA do some marketing in New York. I was not on their payroll, but I was more of a freelance guy. I did some media tours with them as local, as recent as like 3 months ago in Poughkeepsie, New York. But I'm not from that world, and I'm not going to pretend I'm from that world. Nor is Dan, because you got guys like Jim Ross and Jim Cornette out there. We can't hold a candle to them, and we're not going to pretend to. But we do have perspectives in our industry, in our careers, for the big companies we work for, publicly traded companies and things like that, that maybe we have a different view on things. Maybe people like it. Maybe they don't. Maybe they agree. Maybe they disagree. But it's something different. And hopefully people will enjoy that. It's something we're going to try. The first episode, is it okay if I give out what we're going to discuss?
Sure. Absolutely.
So the first episode, I'm smiling because I talked a lot about ECW today. But it is going to be about ECW. And it's going to be about the urban myth / changing story / he said, she said about the WWF, WWE funding ECW. We take a deep dive into that. I crunched more numbers than I do in my actual job, which is awesome and scary at the same time. So that's going to be a fun thing to do. We're going to go over that. And then we have a second podcast. I keep saying podcast, but it's show. That kind of goes hand in hand with the professional view of wrestling. And it's going to be a watch along.
Yeah.
And that's going to be fun. And we're not going to do entire shows. We're going to pick a match or two that is relative to what we're doing on the professional view. So, we're picking ECW. We're going to pick an ECW pay-per-view or a match or two and things like that. And they're going to be connected. It's not going to be totally random, and it's going to go hand in hand with each other.
Yep.
So that's what we got on tap with those, and that's going to be me and Dan taking care of that moving forward. And, we're going to keep doing the podcast. Dan's going to keep hosting those and lots of different topics and different genres of discussion and different types of guests. So that's going to keep coming out. And then, we're going to try to do this wrestling thing as well, because like Dan said, it seems to be very popular. And then we're going to keep going with this video game show, reviews, open to ideas, suggestions, questions, comments, concerns. The next episode is actually going to still be on the Nintendo 64, but we're going to do something different because, this is wrestling and we're going to do the wrestling show. We're going to go something more mainstream. Mario Kart 64 is our next episode.
Thank you for calling it Mario Kart and not Mario.
It should be
Kart.
Luigi Kart.
It should be. And actually, I'm not going to be on that episode. So that's why, you've pretty much driven today's conversation, and going forward, you're going to be the host of these reviews. Now, I know this next one's going to be about Mario Kart. Are you just going to do video games, or no? I think you're going to do other stuff too, right? Or like movies and TV shows and stuff.
Yeah,
as well?
We're going to do more. Got some feedback about the Power Ranger podcast, more than I thought I was going to get about that. So that might be something we look at. Might do a deeper dive into the cartoons of the 90s, movies of the 90s. Like you said, also spin-offs, reboots from things in this time period. So there's definitely a lot of things that we can do. Again, we're certainly open to suggestions that anybody wants to hear or see anything. We're totally open to that. We want to certainly produce something that appeals to the people that are listening, especially in the beginning of this. And we're very grateful to anybody that's listening to this, as we try to build this and make it more fun for both us and for anybody that is listening, and trying to grow our fan base. So Dan, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you coming on board today. I appreciate you letting me drive this and taking us, to some new shows, some new guests coming on board. Should be a lot of fun. And we're going to do some Mario Kart 64. We got some Star Wars stuff coming out too. And it should be a good time.
Awesome, man. Well, again, thank you so much for having me. Again, this was, a pleasure being a guest on your show. And this is still a podcast, even though it's on YouTube. It's still a podcast within the podcast. And again, this is, if you have feedback, make sure we're on YouTube. Leave a comment. That's the easiest way for us to get feedback on what you liked and didn't like, and what this should be about going forward. But again, these YouTube's only podcasts are going to be those deep dives. If you had a topic that we talked about in the regular podcast that comes out every week on Wednesday, and you say, God, I wish you guys would talk more about that. Well, you know what? That's probably going to show up on the YouTube channel. So if you want that, leave us that feedback, whether it's on YouTube here or if you find us on Facebook, Generation S Podcast, and you leave a comment there. Let us know how you want us to handle this. Right now, I think this is probably the best way. And I'm very excited because, again, going forward, I'm not going to be on all these episodes here on YouTube. I'll be uploading them to the channel, but I'm not going to be a part of recording them. So I'm very excited to give these a listen. It'll be a first for me, obviously, since I'm not going to be on these episodes. But no, this was a lot of fun. So thank you so much for having me. And may I just plug the main podcast real quick, if you don't mind?
You know what? Only because Aaron Judge hit home run number 61 tonight, I'll allow it because I'm in a good mood.
Thank you. In honor of Aaron Judge, once again, folks, the Generation S Podcast is a podcast all about growing up in the 90s and early 2000s. And every week it's a different topic. And in fact, going forward, you may start seeing topics come out every single week that are unique. Recently, we've been putting out top 10 guest lists as kind of the off week on episodes. But going forward, we've gotten such a good buzz around the content we've been putting out that there's been more and more topics that we've been able to cover. So you may start seeing a few more topics covered more readily. I'll tell you right now, so if this is going to come out before next Wednesday, and again, we're Wednesday the 28th, so today, in fact, the Top 10 Power Rangers Villains episode just launched on the main podcast directories. Next week, folks, the first week in October, we're talking all about Goosebumps, and actually that is going to be one without you, Lou. It's going to be me and our buddy Dan Vorbeck. Very excited about that. He's going to be my first time hosting without you, so we'll see how that goes. Certainly, you're a pretty special guy, Lou.
Thank
but
you.
I think Dan will do good. And you'll have to make sure you give a listen as well, since you're not involved at that one at all.
I'm not.
Actually.
And you know what the ironic thing is? I met him in radio class, Dan Vorbeck, in high school. and I met you in radio class in college.
Oh, I didn't know you met him in radio class in
Yes.
high school. That's
yes,
hilarious.
I met both the Dans in radio classes.
That's spooky.
It is.
That's crazy.
And I'm going. So when that drops, I'm going to be at New York Comic Con with him those coming days. So should be fun.
That's right. Yeah, because we've already recorded the Goosebumps episode. Obviously,
You're breaking the fourth wall.
I am. That's okay. We can break the fourth wall. Anyway, guys. So I mean, this is your show to wrap up, Lou. But I'll just say again, thank you so much for listening, guys, and I look forward to what's to come with Generation S.
Appreciate the time, Dan. We'll be back shortly with those wrestling episodes and Mario Kart 64. Until then, thank you for listening, and we will catch you down the road.